Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. What if neglected Naruto became God Slayer of fairy tale for yandere Seilah? Movie. No rage, no sadness or pain, no feelings of euphoria or relief. Just absolutely nothing. If one had to describe the feelings of one Naruto Uzumaki as he laid up on the hospital bed, the only word that would come to mind as they observed his facial expression was blank. Nothing seemed to faze him. He looked for all intents and purposes as though he had nothing to live or die for. A rather disheartening conclusion for the legendary Jiraiya the Toad Sage in the 5th Hokage Tsunade Senju as they stared at the boy that came to mean so much to them both. Hey kid, I know you're hurting, but you'll pull through this, and before you know it you'll become Hokage and will be barking orders at both me and Tsunade, so stay strong kiddo. Jiraiya spoke softly to his apprentice, internally hoping to see a sign of life in his eyes. Nothing, a depressingly expected reaction for both Sannin as they've been enduring the silent treatment from the young blonde since he woke up half an hour ago after 48 hours of being unconscious. Naruto just continued to emptily gaze at the ceiling of the hospital. When admitted to a hospital, the first and only thing the blonde would do when regaining consciousness was to escape, as he'd much rather spend his time training or eating ichiraku or trying to convince Sakura-chan to go out on a date with him. It was as he found a better way to spend his time over staying in the boring hospital. Not today though. This time around the young shinobi had no thoughts of an escape plan, no sudden notion of wanting to leave the hospital. This time the blonde was content to spend his time here and contemplate in silence about the recent events that transpired 2 days ago. 2 days ago when he fought his best friend and rival Sasuke Uchiha and successfully brought him back to Konoha. One would think that the young Jinchuriki would have been jumping for joy at his success, and that most certainly would have been the case if not for the fact that his best friend almost killed him. Family is something precious. They're supposed to care and look out for one another no matter what. So why would Sasuke, his best friend and brother, try to kill him? Sure, he was fighting Sasuke to prevent him from joining Orochimaru and to force him back in Konoha, but that was because he cared. Did Sasuke not care for him? Or did he? But he decided that the bond they shared was not worth it. It baffled the blonde that someone he trusted immensely was the very same one to be the cause of his life almost fading away. Death came very close to clutching Naruto's existence, and the one responsible for that was the one who he proudly claimed to be his best friend, his rival and his brother, a claim that in the end proved to be entirely one-sided as he bitterly found out. Clearly he needed to evaluate everything that happened in his life, because to continue on as though nothing happened was extremely stupid. The blonde could not pretend as though everything was fine between him and Sasuke, because it was not. His friend tried to kill him. That alone told the blonde that he wasn't living his life right. And so the young Jinchuriki calmly stayed in his bed contemplating everything while thoroughly ignoring any and all company that came to visit him. I've never seen him like this, Jiraiya. Tsunade voiced out painfully, her chocolate brown eyes full of worry and concern for the boy she recently came to care for. I know Tsunade, but Naruto is a strong kid. I have every faith in him that he'll be alright. Naruto, it's me, Tsunade Ba-chan. Please talk to me, Gaki. You can tell me and Jiraiya anything, kid, and I promise you that everything will be alright. She cupped both of Naruto's cheeks and kissed his forehead, her maternal instincts compelling her to embrace the boy, and embrace she did. Jiraiya joined in on the hug. What she said, kiddo, you can talk to us and tell us anything you want or need to get off your chest. We're your family and you are ours. No response, Naruto. You did everything right and you aren't a horrible person if that's what you're thinking. If anything, in my eyes you are the sweetest and the most innocent kid out there. Never think otherwise. Tsunade only hugged him tighter to emphasize her point. Jiraiya wholeheartedly agreed with his teammate's claim as he gazed at his precious apprentice. Naruto, you're one of the kindest souls out there in the world, and the sad thing is that there are many who will try to change that. To change and twist you into something else altogether. Sasuke Uchiha is just one of many. Jiraiya placed his hand on Naruto's head and affectionately ruffled his hair. I know it's hard to accept that, kiddo, but it wasn't that Sasuke wasn't thinking straight or that he was influenced by the curse mark. No, he was perfectly fine when he decided that he wanted you dead. You just need to understand that he never was your friend to begin with. Someone like him didn't deserve your friendship in the first place, and you have to ensure that he doesn't ever get another chance at becoming your friend, because he will take advantage of your kindness and try to kill you. Jiraiya hoped that his student, though unresponsive, would take his words to heart. Naruto just continued to blankly stare at the ceiling. He heard both Jiraiya and Tsunade but was simply not in the mood to respond. Naruto, Tsunade murmured gently. It's as I said earlier, you did the right thing in forcing Sasuke back to Konoha as it was your mission. Sasuke might claim that you're a monster, but just remember that he has no ground to speak on considering he tried to kill you. You're not a monster, Naruto, and both me and Jiraiya are proud of you. She finally let go of the blonde, internally praying that anything she or her teammates said would stick to the boy who reminded her so much of her little brother and fiancé. To say Sasuke Uchiha was in her shitlist was putting it lightly. Only two things were stopping her from killing that spoiled and disgusting brat: the council and the reaction of the boy she was hugging. Both she and Jiraiya felt their heartbreak as they gazed at Naruto's empty and lifeless eyes. Tsunade couldn't bear looking anymore and quickly kissed the younger blonde's forehead and walked away, leaving only Jiraiya to remain with the fourth Hokage's legacy. A legacy that Jiraiya failed in nurturing and protecting. He vowed despite his past failures that he wouldn't fail Naruto any more than he already had in his life. If you ever want to talk to someone, Naruto, about anything, just know that I'm more than happy to help and be there for you. Jiraiya once more ruffled the Jinchuriki's hair affectionately, then walked away, leaving Naruto to silently contemplate his thoughts in addition to everything that Jiraiya and Tsunade had said to him. The fact that his friend and rival tried to kill him, it was made painstakingly clear to him that some, or perhaps even all those he considered to be his friend or family, could also harbor the same intentions, and that wasn't acceptable with the young shinobi. Some of his precious people didn't truly care for him, and as of now, the only thing that mattered to the Jinchuriki was analyzing every past interactions and determining who he could and couldn't trust. Many hours passed for the unusually passive and silent blonde. He hadn't had any company ever since Jiraiya and Tsunade left, and for that the young shinobi was grateful. There was a lot of anger and bitterness in him that just waited to be released as he spent hours just filtering through past memories spent with people who he thought cared for him. As it turned out, now that he actually paid attention, there weren't many who did care, but of that remarkably short list who did, among them was Jiraiya and Tsunade, the ramen stand owners, Iruka and Konohamaru, Shikamaru, Choji, Hinata, and Gaara, who he developed a kinship with. Outside of that, everyone else just either saw him as a useful tool or as an annoyance. Or as a monster. Naruto thought, crinkling his now in disgust. He got off the hospital bed and calmly walked out of the room, a rare occurrence in itself as he usually left through the window. Being the Kyuubi Jinchuriki came with its own perks, as Naruto was already healed from his injuries 2 days ago. Injuries and wounds and blemishes that would have taken weeks, months and possibly years were all healed in just a time frame of 48 hours. All but one, as Naruto had a ghastly fist-shaped scar just an inch away from his heart, a scar that would never fade away, and the nine-tailed Jinchuriki preferred it that way, a constant reminder to always keep an eye on not just his enemies but on his friends as well. Eventually making it out of the hospital, the blonde shinobi wandered aimlessly through the empty streets of Konoha, his mind filled to the brim with the kind of thoughts and conclusions that would have upset him prior to the Uchiha trying to kill him. All my life I lived with everyone hating me for something out of my control. I trained so that I could become Hokage someday, so that people can change their views about me. In the process I've made friends and met people that have become something like family to me. Some of my friends and family, Naruto thought sarcastically, were never truly friends or family, a good example being the entirety of my team. If that's not stressful and annoying enough, I have a group of 10s rank criminals who are after me and being criminals. They'd have no problem in targeting the few people he did still care about. It hurt his pride to admit, but compared to the likes of S-rank shinobi, Naruto in comparison was pathetically weak. If he wanted to protect those few who truly cared for him, then him being weak needed to change. That was the conclusion he made, but the question was where to start. The blonde decided to return to the hospital after his conclusion, feeling like he could use a good sleep and some rest. 4 days had passed since then, days spent almost entirely in solidarity, and that's how he preferred it. It gave him ample time to think and consider, to decide and muse, and the peace and quiet was calming. He didn't ever think he'd enjoy being alone, but surprisingly he did. It was then, much to his dismay, that he learned that he was finally allowed to have visitors, no doubt a ploy by Tsunade to help him. He understood her intentions and even respected her more for it, but he just simply wasn't in the mood to talk to anyone. Especially not Kakashi or Sakura. He wasn't very lucky. That was the thought going through his head as Sakura entered his room this evening. "Hey Naruto. I'm sorry I didn't visit you earlier. I wanted to, but no one but Tsunade-sama was allowed to enter your room. I wanted to say thank you so much for keeping your promise to me and bringing Sasuke-kun back. What you did means a lot to me. Sakura frowned at the silence. Was Naruto still angry at Sasuke-kun for the fight a few days ago? But Sasuke-kun was being influenced by the curse mark that Orochimaru left on him. It wasn't really his fault that he tried to leave. I heard from Tsunade-sama that Sasuke-kun tried to kill you. I understand why you're angry, but I also know that he would never try to kill you if he wasn't being influenced by the curse mark. You're his best friend. Sakura spoke genuinely, meaning every word uttered. Naruto continued to ignore her, much more interested in studying the architecture of the ceiling than listening to Sakura's shrill voice. I can understand that you need time, but I wanted to check up on you and to thank you. You really are a good friend, and I hope you get out of the hospital soon. The pattern of silence continued. Sakura grew annoyed with her blonde teammate. Naruto, stop ignoring me and say something. Naruto finally acknowledged her and slowly turned to look at the only other occupant of the room, coldly glaring at the pinkette who reeled back and gulped, totally unaccustomed to her blonde teammate who always asked her out on a date, just staring at her so icily. I'll leave you on your own. Sakura left the room in a hurry, heart thundering with bits of fear and unease as she paced away. Seeing her leave made Naruto feel a lot better, but the memory of the words uttered remained. Did she really think Sasuke was under the influence of the curse mark? Did she really think that after serious contemplation that he would remain friends with her? Naruto wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. He knew that, and he accepted that there were many people who just happened to be smarter than he is, but by no means was he stupid. For the first time since he woke up, Naruto frowned as he looked towards the door where Sakura left. He rolled his eyes and laid back on his pillow, his mood thoroughly ruined, no thanks to his former crush. He tried his best not to let her words ring in his head, and he succeeded eventually for the most part, his thoughts instead drifting to training and how to become stronger. After all, 10s rank shinobi are hunting him because of his burden. But was the Kyuubi truly a burden? He may not like the beast, but it's not like the Kyuubi wanted to stay inside him either. Say what you will, but he at least could trust the Nine Tails in that he wanted his survival since they were tied because of the seal. Sure, almost everyone in the village despise him because of being a jinchuriki, but being a jinchuriki is what saved him from death at the hands of his teammate. Naruto didn't like the Kyuubi, a feeling that probably would never change, but he should at least thank the monster for helping him stay alive. But thinking of the Kyuubi made Naruto's thoughts shift towards his goal, or former goal, of being Hokage. It started with wanting people to acknowledge him in a positive manner rather than to ignore or hate his existence. But was the acknowledgement of these people really important? Ever since he could remember, he would always be met with hateful glares or scorned looks, getting kicked out of the orphanage, not being served edible food or water. The only reason he's made it till now was because of the kindness and mercy of the ramen stand owners and the third Hokage. The owners of Ichiraku Ramen were truly good to him, and so was the third Hokage, who, despite not being available all the time, tried his best to be there, and Naruto loved him for that. But everyone else, they never gave him a chance. That thought was something Naruto made a habit to not think about. After all, it was better to look at the bright side of things. Yes, that's how he lived his life, despite all the hatred and misery that surrounded him, but after an attempt at his life by someone he considered precious. Naruto could not kid himself anymore. The way he continuously forgave everyone was wrong of him. There was nothing wrong with forgiving people, but there was a limit, and almost everyone here crossed that limit a long time ago. No longer could he pine after the dream of becoming Hokage, when the goal of becoming Hokage was for the acknowledgement of the cruel villagers and shinobis here. They were the real monsters for treating a child that way. He stood up and made his way outside the room. He'd been cooped up in the hospital long enough. He didn't feel like returning home just yet when he'd already been in a confined space for 4 days. Using some fresh air sounded just like what the doctor ordered. With that reasoning, a few minutes later, and Naruto found himself strolling the forest, just silently admiring the beauty of nature and how it all seemed to look even better under the gaze of the moon. Hello. A woman's voice spoke to him from behind. Naruto paused and looked over the owner of the sensual voice. The owner in question being a beautiful young woman with moon-glistening olive skin and shimmering gold hair that cascaded all the way down to just above her wide hips. Her hair framed her delicate and angelic face in a way that only seemed to emphasize her breathtaking features. A small cute button nose on top of pink pouty lips, a sharp jawline that went in correlation with her high cheekbones, and perhaps her most distinguishable feature being the finest set of hazel-colored eyes that just gazed at him amusingly, no doubt aware of the blonde giving her a once-over. The mystery woman was attired in a royal white toga that draped over her voluptuous shapely form. A curtain of fabric that concealed her whole body but left her slender shoulders and feminine arms exposed while also possessing a three-quarter slit, showing off deliciously thick tanned thighs that wobbled enticingly as she swayed her way towards him. It was a unique fashion choice, one that Naruto, and the entire elemental nation, was unfamiliar with. He was no Jiraiya, but even he felt his cheek dust a small pink before he forced the blush away. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Naruto Uzumaki." She stood before him, towering over his 4'9" frame with her height of 5'4". "My name is Akira and I have an offer to make that I think you'll find most appealing." Naruto stayed silent, but a part of him was curious and Akira easily picked up on that. "I have been watching you for quite a long while now and I have been very impressed with your inner character and spirit." "And why have you been watching me? What is your offer?" Naruto questioned her. "I have been watching you because you want power and I can give that to you. I also know of your secret desire to find a new home after recent and not so recent events and I can help with that too." Akira took a small breath and continued. "You wish for a place where people won't look at you and see the nine tails instead. You want a place free of the stigma of being a jinchuriki and I can help you with both being strong and finding a new home away from all this hatred directed towards you." Naruto couldn't lie to himself. Her offer did intrigue him, but regardless of whether he was comfortable leaving Konoha or not, there was no doubt that there was a motive behind this generous offer. "And where is this place where I wouldn't be judged for being a jinchuriki? How would you help me become strong? Furthermore, how would I know you're telling the truth? And if you were telling the truth, what's the catch behind this proposal?" Akira inwardly smiled at the blonde's questioning. It was pretty cute and a little hilarious that she, a goddess of all beings, was getting interrogated by a young human child. "The place I plan on sending you to is called Earthland. It's not here in the elemental nation or even in this world, rather it's an entirely different universe," she revealed to him. Huh. Naruto was bewildered. Of all the things he was expecting to hear, he wasn't expecting a different dimension to be his answer. "What the hell are you talking about? You will find this hard to believe, but I am a goddess, Naruto-kun, and it's just as I said. I can send you to another dimension where the concept of war is scarce. The ideas of jinchurikis do not exist there and peace is much more prevalent in Earthland." Naruto frowned as he listened to her, so his ears weren't clogged up when she said that her idea of a new home was a different dimension. Despite the lunacy behind her statement, Naruto stayed to at least to hear out. As crazy as this woman or goddess as she called herself might be, she was in no way rude or condescending to him. He might as well reciprocate some of that respect by staying and hearing the end of her offer. Didn't mean he wouldn't question her claims though. "You're a goddess, huh?" Naruto tried and failed to suppress the sarcasm in his tone. "And why would I believe you to be one? Do you not realize how insane that sounds, lady?" Akira giggled at that. "Pretty insane, I know, but being a goddess, I have the answer to almost all your questions and that should be good enough proof, yes?" Naruto narrowed his eyes. "The answer to almost all my questions?" She nodded enthusiastically. Naturally there are a few answers to certain questions that I'm forbidden to indulge, but any questions you have on almost anything I should be able to answer." "Then you can start by telling me the names of my parents," Naruto asked her calmly, very much aware that she wouldn't know the answer to this question. "Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki," she answered smoothly. "What?" Naruto almost yelled out. "My father is the fourth Hokage." "You must be lying because there is no way he is my father, and who the hell is Kushina Uzumaki? We share the same last name, yes, but that could be a coincidence." Akira felt her heart break slightly for the child before her. She could only imagine the pain of not knowing one's parents. "Kushina Uzumaki was the jinchuriki of the nine tails before you and she is your parent, so is Minato Namikaze. You can verify my claim with your Hokage and your master Jiraiya." Naruto took a deep breath to calm himself and regain his composure. "I will verify those claims for myself, but there are still some questions I have that still lack the answers I want. How would I become strong? And assuming that everything you said is the truth, what do you gain from this proposal? If you really are a goddess, then wouldn't my help be unneeded?" Hazel-colored eyes gleamed with ambition as they locked on a confused but firm blue. "In Earthland, people do not possess chakra, but in its place is magic." "Magic?" Naruto questioned her. Akira nodded. "Yes, magic has many similar qualities that it shares with chakra, but there are just as many differences. For starters, magic is not made within the body, but rather there are particles in the atmosphere called ethernano that the body absorbs and stores in an organ. The explanation is a lot more complicated to explain, but that's the gist of it. Magic in general is a lot more versatile than chakra, but that doesn't necessarily mean that magic is better. That said, you could become strong by learning a special brand of magic that is both powerful and incredibly unique to the world. And that form of magic is called? Naruto asked her curiously. She grinned. God Slayer magic, Darkness God Slayer magic to be more precise. Naruto had to admit, the name sounded very cool, however he couldn't help but be confused. You're teaching me magic to slay you and your kind? Why? The answer to that question is related to what I benefit from you agreeing to our deal, assuming you do, of course. Naruto said nothing but waited for her to continue. The smile on her face faded, her posture straightened and her eyes conveyed power and resolution. She no longer looked like a cheerful young woman as she regarded the jinchuriki with the seriousness one would expect from a god-like being. The reason I'm having you learn God Slayer magic is because I need you to kill a god, quite a few of them actually. That's my one and only condition, and if you agree to these terms then I will send you to another world where you can train in God Slayer magic among other things and become very powerful while finding a new home for yourself. Naruto crossed his arms as he stared at his fellow blonde. And why exactly do you need me, a mortal, to kill a bunch of gods when you yourself are a goddess and can fight them on your own? Because the form you see before you, Akira said while gesturing to herself, is a corporeal form. My true body is locked and sealed away. Naruto raised an eyebrow yet continued listening. I did go after them a long time ago, but I was rash and foolish. I was the strongest of them all, and due to my arrogance I took them all on at the same time, and that's what led to my downfall and sealing. The only way for me to be free is for you to hunt and kill the gods responsible for sealing me one by one, she finished saying. Even if everything you said is the truth, I can't just leave when I still have people I care about, people precious to me that could get attacked by some very powerful shinobis. Akira smiled at the hurt yet still pure-hearted teen. The Akatsuki, I am aware. I know that the reason you thirst for power is to protect those you care about, even after everything you experienced. I have a solution to that problem if you're willing. Rather than transport just you to Earthland, I can transport all the jinchuriki there. Naruto thought long and hard about this. It would halt the Akatsuki's plan, yes, but didn't the other jinchurikis have a right to choose what they wanted? After all, as a jinchuriki himself, Naruto knew the struggles of wanting to have his own rights and choices. It wouldn't be fair of him to decide for them when such a choice should be of their own choosing. Is it possible to bring the jinchuriki here? Naruto asked her seriously. So they can choose for themselves if they wish to go to Earthland or to remain here. Akira nodded, and with a wave of her hand, an enormous circle formed on top of the unique duo, much to Naruto's shock. From the circle came the forms of the 8 other jinchurikis, who each had their own unique reaction as they fell to the ground. So she really is a goddess, Naruto thought with amazement. Fool ya fool. Anybody jumping the almighty killer bee better watch out, cause I sting like a bee. What the censored just happened? Killer bee, can you be serious for once? I'm too old for this. Ouch, my butt hurts. Where is that bastard Uchiha? Why are you all so noisy? Akira giggled and Naruto's sweat dropped as he observed his fellow jinchuriki, not exactly how he envisioned meeting others like him. Gaara groaned as he got up. His gaze immediately landed on Naruto and his eyes lit up on seeing his friend until he registered the form of everyone that surrounded him. His posture tensed as he got into a defensive position. Such a reaction was mirrored by the other 7 as they each got into their own stance. Everyone. Akira's melodious voice effortlessly captured the attention of the jinchuriki as they each glared at her minus Killer Bee and Roshi, the former blushing as his eyes landed on a magnificent pair of censoreds covered by her toga while the latter had a massive nosebleed. Yugito was livid as she noticed just where exactly was Bee staring at. Focus, you idiot. She whacked the back of his head, and that caused Akira to break out into another giggle. If I may have your attention, I brought you all here because of this young man, she said, gesturing towards the 9-tailed jinchuriki. Naruto stepped forward to address them all, a slight hint of nervousness creeping in his soul as he felt his fellow containers all gaze at him. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, and like you all, I too am a jinchuriki. Such a statement brought wide-eyed reactions as this was the first time that all 9 jinchurikis were in a single place. I had you all brought here because this woman, or should I say goddess, can send us to another world. Han. The 5 tails jinchuriki stepped forward, And how exactly do you know for certain that this woman is a goddess? Naruto scoffed. How exactly do you think you were brought here along with everyone else? I too was doubtful until I saw her form a circle in the sky that brought all of you here. Well, I for one am grateful to you, young Uzumaki. The shortest jinchuriki of the group spoke up while gaining Naruto's attention. If not for you, then I'd still be robbed of my free will. My name is Yagura Karatachi, the fourth Mizukage. Instantaneously after his declaration, all the jinchuriki minus Naruto, Gaara and Fu were wary as they paid careful attention to perhaps the cruelest cage in existence. Utakata grit his teeth as he observed the fourth Mizukage. Your actions caused an entire civil war that has destroyed the entire village. Yagura grew murderous as he glared at his fellow jinchuriki. Actions that weren't under my control. An Uchiha wearing an orange mask and a black cloak adorned with red clouds attacked and enslaved me with his genjutsu. And that individual along with the other 9 members of that group is why I had you all brought here. Akira declared while shifting the attention to her once more. I wish to make a deal with Naruto, but he worried that leaving to Earthland, the world Naruto spoke of, would leave the few people he cared for in danger, as the Akatsuki are a bunch of S-class criminals. And how exactly does this relate to us? Yugito questioned as she locked eyes with her fellow blonde woman. Because by moving you all to Earthland, it halts the Akatsuki's plan of capturing all of you, and they can and will capture you if you stay here. Consider the fourth Mizukage. He is immensely strong among you, and even he lost to one of their members and was controlled for a long time until just now. She explained calmly. The Akatsuki won't attack the villages since they can't go around interrogating each one in regards to your whereabouts. I had thought of simply sending you all there to Earthland if Naruto agreed to my deal, but he wished for you all to decide for yourself if leaving this world is what you want. Being a jinchuriki, Naruto said slowly, it has people judge you unfairly, treat you unfairly, and if they could then they would decide every choice for us, and I'm not okay with that. I know you all aren't either, which is why I want you all to choose what you want just as I do. To say everyone was surprised was an understatement. Even Gaara, who fought and was on the receiving end of Naruto's kindness, was stunned. Well, little 9, I get to step out of line, so I'm all for show. This will be a woe. My name is Killer Bee. I have a lot of we. Bee's voice snapped everyone out of their shock. Bee. Yugito roared as she smacked him once more. Stop embarrassing us. She sighed in frustration and tried to ignore the snickers of the other containers before turning to Naruto. My name is Yugito and I'm the 2 Tails Jinchuriki. The idiot is the 8 Tails Jinchuriki. Everyone followed suit and introduced themselves. I'm Gaara of the desert and I'm the 1 Tails Jinchuriki. Gaara introduced himself to the group. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Yagura Karatachi and I'm the 3 Tails Jinchuriki. I am Roshi and the beast I contain is the 4 tails. I am also the oldest amongst you all, so feel free to call me Roshi Senpai or just Senpai. The elderly man with red hair spoke friend Lily. It was after Roshi that the next one stepped forward, most definitely the largest jinchuriki of them all by a quite margin, and cladded in heavy armor and a red kasa spoke up. My name is Han and I'm the jinchuriki of the 5 tails. Utakata. 6 tails jinchuriki. A lanky teen with a blue yukata introduced himself boredly. My name is Fu. The green-haired pre-teen waved cheerily at the group, eliciting smiles, nods and a blush from Gaara. And I'm the jinchuriki to lucky number 7. Akira clasped her hands enthusiastically. Now that you're all introduced, I wish to hear your answer in regards to sending you to Earthland. Yes, about that. Roshi said as he glanced her way. I think we all can agree that you really are a goddess with how you brought us all here at the same time from out of nowhere, but though I believe you, I have questions, a lot of them before I decide to go, and I'm sure that's the case with everyone else here. She gave him a sultry smile. Then fire away, Roshi, but do keep in mind that I'll only answer a select few questions before I send you back to your respective villages. This world you spoke of, Earthland, is it peaceful? Or is that world also gripped by war and hatred? He asked her seriously. Earthland is extremely peaceful compared to the elemental nation. They too have their problems as do all worlds, but compared to over here, that world is paradise. She replied truthfully. Here's the next question. Utakata said. Are there jinchurikis in that world? No jinchurikis. She shook her head. Will I get a chance to be part of a family? It was Fu that asked that question, a bit meek and embarrassed as she felt everyone gaze at her. Akira smiled gently and nodded. Most definitely Fu. Yagura coughed to get the goddess's attention. Assuming that Naruto doesn't accept the deal between you and him, will you still send those of us who wish to leave to Earthland, or is that all dependent on whether Naruto agrees or not? Only if Naruto agrees to my deal. Sending the jinchuriki to Earthland will draw attention to myself. Attention that I do not want or need but can stomach only if I have something to gain out of this. Fu dropped her head in worry. Now I believe that's enough, Questy. What exactly do you want from Naruto? What deal are you trying to make with him? Gaara cut her off while slightly earning her ire. That caught the curiosity of the remaining jinchuriki as they all wondered what made Naruto so special that she would go out of her way to bring them here at his request. That is a matter that doesn't concern you or anyone else. I can respect that you're looking out for your friend, Gaara of the desert, but this deal is private and important to me, Akira patiently told him. Akira. Naruto softly called out. The goddess tossed a glance to her right, hazel eyes lit with curiosity and interest. Yes, my dear? I want you to send all the jinchurikis who wish to leave to Earthland. Do that and I will agree to your deal, he proposed. For the umpteenth time, Naruto caught everyone off guard with his words and offer. It was Fu most of all affected by his proposition. But why? She said, confused orange orbs meeting irresolute blue. Why agree to this deal of hers so that those of us who want can live in Earthland? I'm grateful, don't get me wrong, but why? That's because it's obvious that you and everyone here wants to go. We're all jinchurikis, that makes us family. He shrugged nonchalantly and Fu nodded shakily, touched by his words and sentiment. Gaara felt his lips twitch into a smile. That was his friend, all right. But the word family, before you send us back, I do have one last question. Gaara voiced out. If I decide to go to Earthland, can my siblings come with me? Akira nodded. Absolutely, just make sure that when you start glowing that they hold on to you so they can be transported with you to Earthland. I will give all of you a full day's time to do what you must. With a twist of her hand, a magic circle formed from above the group that censored all the jinchurikis but Naruto and returned them to their home. Turning towards Naruto, the goddess had to suppress a smile at his gobsmacked expression. They're a very lively bunch, aren't they? Naruto dumbly nodded. I'll be here tomorrow night, Naruto-kun. That should give you ample time to confront those two shinobis you respect so much in regards to your parents, though I believe my display has already convinced you that I'm not lying. Have a good night, my champion. She uttered elegantly, turning her back towards the shinobi and getting ready to leave. Wait. Naruto yelled out, gaining her attention as she peered over her shoulder to look at the nine-tails jinchuriki. Composing himself, he spoke in a lower tone. Why me? What is it about me that you said you find impressive? What makes me different from the many others who are better than I am in everything? Why are you interested in making me your champion when I'm so weak? He asked her with all seriousness he could muster. Akira gazed at him softly, her eyes belaying understanding and tenderness for the young shinobi. There are several reasons why, but let me start by saying that though there are others who are better than you in certain aspects, you surpass them all in the two categories that I value most: will and kindness. Seeing Naruto's cute and confused expression, she elaborated more. I have laid witness to many kind souls who endured much pain and it changed their gentle souls to something more malicious. You, despite enduring so much, are still kind, and that's something I can immensely respect. As for your will, she said simply as she walked towards him, it's by far one of the strongest I have ever seen, and I wish to put it to good use. With a strong will to win, anything is possible. Your potential, my dear Naruto, is limitless. Akira smiled tenderly at him. I choose you because in addition to your kindness and will, you remind me a lot of myself when I was very young. She cupped his cheeks gently with both hands, caressing his face the way a mother would with her child. To me, you are better than everyone else. For the second time since the past several days, Naruto felt the blood rush to his cheeks at the goddess's declaration. Thank you, he replied a bit shyly. She giggled and nodded. There is one thing I need to know though. Why exactly did you attack them? The gods, I mean. What have they done to anger you so much? He asked her with no small amount of curiosity. She smiled at him, but Naruto felt uncomfortable as his danger senses blared madly from being in close proximity to her. Trust me, Naruto-kun, you don't want to know what those monsters have done. He nodded warily. I'll see you tomorrow night. She let go of the younger blonde's face and walked away, her form quickly fading away from the jinchuriki's eyes. It was strange. Leaving the hospital only at night and exploring Konoha when everybody else was asleep made Naruto a bit accustomed to walking the streets with no soul in sight. It was something he quickly grew to enjoy. Which is why he felt a small tad bit uncomfortable as he walked through the busy streets of Konoha. He tried ignoring and successfully blocked most of the whispers and comments made by the civilian population as he made his way to the Hokage Tower. To his inner surprise though, some of the comments were either praises to his deeds or worry over his health. A week ago he would have jumped in joy at this revelation. He could hardly care anymore. The acknowledgement of those around him no longer mattered to him. All that mattered to him right now was asking Tsunade and Jiraiya the truth about his parents, to get his answer and then to leave Elemental Nation. That was the plan as he entered the Hokage building. He should have learned by now that life was simply not that merciful. Naruto. Kakashi greeted his student with all the confidence he could muster. For the past week he felt a tidal wave of shame engulf and swallow him. He felt responsible for the condition of his pupil as it was his decision to teach Sasuke the Chidori, his decision not to train his sensei's son properly. Swamped by regret and guilt, he found himself unable to approach the blonde to apologize over how much of a failure he was as a teacher to his precious student. Ironically enough, the shame only increased until he was forced to come before the blonde to ask for his forgiveness. I am so very sorry. I have failed you badly and I should have never taught Sasuke that jutsu. It's my fault for teaching him that jutsu and I bear full responsibility for what he did and for not training you properly. Kakashi bowed his head, unable to currently look at his student due to his incompetence. Naruto said nothing. What exactly could he say to the man? That he forgives him and was alright with just living and forgetting everything that happened till now. His teacher wasn't exactly bad to him, but neither was he good. Perhaps his sensei did deserve another chance to prove himself to the young shinobi, but Naruto felt such a thing did not matter to him as of this moment. He had much more important things to think about that took priority over whether he should forgive someone or not. He walked past his teacher and left the copycat ninja to grief on his own in the hallway. Luckily Naruto didn't have anyone converse with him as he made his way to the Hokage's office. He stood before the door and knocked. Come in. Tsunade voiced out from behind the door. He needed no more invitation and stepped inside the office, being greeted by a grin from Jiraiya and a small smile from Tsunade. About time you got off the hospital bed. It's good to see you on your feet, kiddo. Jiraiya exclaimed genuinely. What the pervert said. How are you doing, Naruto? Tsunade asked warmly. Naruto felt his heart slightly melt from the care shown by both Sannin. They weren't perfect, but they did care for him and Naruto couldn't deny he cared for them as well. I'm doing alright. He replied back, much to Jiraiya and Tsunade's relief. That's good to hear. Speaking of good, me and Tsunade-chan were just discussing something, and we decided you could benefit from being outside the village, me and you on a trip. What do y'all think? Jiraiya inquired. I do like the idea of being outside and exploring, but there is something we need to talk about, Naruto stated seriously. Both older ninjas paid immense attention to the blonde, so he let the words flow. My parents. He revealed the topic of conversation to them. Jiraiya did a double take while Tsunade looked alarmed, wondering if that bastard Danzo contacted him. Naruto closed his eyes as he recollected last night's conversation with a goddess. I found out recently from someone that my parents are Kushina Uzumaki and the 4th Hokage Minato Namikaze. Naturally I doubted the person, but they said that I could verify the information with you both. Are they really my parents' names? Jiraiya found himself lost for words. Of all the things he was expecting his apprentice to bring up, this certainly wasn't what he had in mind. A small glance at Tsunade showed that she was in a similar predicament. Well? Naruto questioned, snapping the Sannins out of their shock. Naruto, who exactly told you that? Tsunade asked him. Naruto frowned. It doesn't matter who told me, all I want to know is if it's the truth. It matters to us because the person who told you this is undoubtedly dangerous and someone you should stay away from. The jinchuriki started to feel his irritation brewing at the lack of answer. Is it the truth or not? The room was silent, agonizingly silent, as both older ninjas said nothing until Jiraiya finally sighed and nodded. Both the Toad Sage and the Hokage grew uncomfortable as Naruto gazed at them and said nothing for a while. Prior to a week ago, if someone had told them that their favorite genin would be this quiet, they'd have laughed at the person's face and walked away. Why? Why keep this from me? Were you ever going to tell me who my parents were, or was the plan to keep this secret to your last breath? It was Tsunade who answered. We were planning to tell you when you become 17 years old. We kept this from you so we could protect you, Naruto. Naruto snarled lightly. And how exactly does this protect me? Your father, Jiraiya said, was a very powerful shinobi. He made a lot of enemies in his life who would be more than okay with torturing him, and worse, they lost their chance 13 years ago, but if by chance they learned about you, you would forever live your life looking after you shoulder. He has that many enemies. Enemies who would be delighted to hear about this. We kept this from you so as to lessen the possibility of people finding out and putting your life even more at risk than what it already is, Tsunade exclaimed. I still had a right to know. Naruto thundered angrily, startling both Jiraiya and Tsunade. Do you know how many times I wondered if my parents abandoned me? If they loved me or not? Those were questions I thought about every day, every single day. Your parents do love you, Naruto. Jiraiya spoke quietly. They were brimming with joy once they learned of you. Minato couldn't stop saying that he will be a father quite happily, and it was the same, if not more, with Kushina. They loved you so much. Naruto's eyes were cold as he glared at his master. Then why did my father seal the Kyuubi in me that night? Didn't he technically choose this village over me? And what about my mother? What happened to her? Jiraiya didn't flinch as he gazed back at his apprentice's eyes. Your father didn't choose Konoha over you, if that's what you're thinking. You need to understand, Naruto, that your mother was the previous Jinchuriki, and for a good reason too. She was an Uzumaki. Tsunade said, dragging Naruto's attention to her. The Uzumaki clan is a cousin clan to the Senjus, and only they had the biology strong enough to withstand having the 9 tails sealed within them. That's also the reason why the previous Jinchuriki before Kushina was Mito Uzumaki, the first Hokage's wife and my grandmother. Naruto Jiraiya placed his hand on the younger shinobi's shoulder. Minato had strong morals for a shinobi. He could never ask another parent to give their child so he can seal a beast inside them, and even if he could, you were the only one capable of containing the 9 tails. He hated doing that to you, but it was either letting the Kyuubi rampage and killing everyone in Konoha while he fled with you and getting hunted by his many enemies, or it was sealing the Kyuubi in you and ensuring that at the very least that you have a village to live in that will prevent his enemies from coming after you. Jiraiya finished saying. It was never a matter of either choosing you or the village, Naruto. You were just extremely unlucky. Tsunade went over to embrace the blonde. Once within cuddling distance, she hugged the Jinchuriki tightly and lightly kissed his forehead, doing her best to comfort the clearly at pain shinobi. Naruto had to admit that he did feel better being embraced by Tsunade. He may have called her grandma many times, but she was more motherly to him than anything. Speaking of motherly, I still want to know what happened with my mother. Naruto asked a lot more calmly than earlier. An unfortunate side effect for female Jinchurikis is that when they're giving birth, the seal really weakens, which is the perfect time for when a tailed beast wishes to escape. Once a tailed beast escapes from their container, the container dies, and that's what happened with Kushina. Jiraiya declared morosely. The blonde Jinchuriki frowned. So it's my fault that my parents are dead? No. Tsunade bellowed. Naruto, that night with the Kyuubi's escape was in no way your fault, and I will put you in the hospital myself if you think otherwise. Naruto left the hug and stepped away from the female Hokage. But it's because of me that the Kyuubi's seal weakened to the point that he escaped and killed many people, including my parents. If it weren't for me, then they would still be alive. Naruto. Jiraiya stepped forward and stopped when said shinobi raised his hand. The Jinchuriki turned and faced away from his master and the Hokage. I need to be alone, but... Naruto looked over his shoulder to glance at the 2 older shinobis. Thank you for being honest with me. He walked away and didn't look back to see the despondent and regretful look gracing their features. A few hours had passed until it was finally the scheduled time to talk to Akira. Naruto waited in the forest patiently, his mind drifting to thoughts of the future and what it would be like to live in Earthland. The shinobi hadn't had the faintest of clue if being in a new world would be his best or worst decision, but he did know one thing, and that was that he wasn't ever going to be weak ever again. Whether he would come to love Earthland as his world or not remained to be seen, but following Akira, he would have the power to kill a god. And with that power, Naruto could ensure the safety of those he cared for and protect them from any harm that would befall on them. I'm happy you came, Naruto-kun. A melodious voice pulled him from his thoughts, and Naruto looked up to see the same goddess he was waiting for right in front of him. You have no idea just how pleased I am with your decision, that you have decided to become my champion. Akira smiled and walked towards him.
Her beautiful majestic form clad in a black toga that reached all the way down to her ankles and left her arms and delicate shoulders exposed.
The fabric was tight and well fitted, easily accentuating her voluptuous figure and causing the younger blonde to feel his cheeks heat up slightly before he forced down his blush and regarded her calmly. Your offer already caught my attention, but knowing that if I refused that my fellow jinchuriki wouldn't be able to start a new life, that would be extremely selfish of me. Naruto crossed his arms as he eyed her. His response had her giggle. Naruto-kun, my Naruto-kun, Akira drawled out slowly, seductively as she stood before him, placing a hand on his face and stroking his whisker marks tenderly. You doing such a thing for your fellow jinchuriki? It was an example of how I was right in that you're still a really kind soul despite all you've went through. Naruto said nothing. Before I send you to Earthland, I will ask only once, do you truly wish to leave everyone you know behind? Without saying any goodbyes? She dropped her hand and looked seriously into the eyes of the shorter blonde. I left a note in my room telling Jiraiya and Tsunade that I will come back someday once I'm strong enough to protect them and myself from the threat of the Akatsuki. If I go through with this, will I ever be able to come back here? He questioned her. Yes, but only after I deem you strong enough to be able to face the strongest of the Akatsuki, and when will I grant you the ability to travel between worlds. She crossed her arms, daring him to challenge her. Very well, I agree to this. I will become the strongest god slayer in existence. I will face and kill the gods who sealed you, and I will release you from your prison. Naruto vowed to her, eliciting an extremely pleased smile to form on the heart-fluttering visage of the blonde goddess. Then you will need this, Naruto-kun. She handed him an old and ancient book. I unfortunately won't be able to teach you myself as I am sealed away, but this book should help in explaining how to grasp and utilize darkness god slayer magic. Who are the gods that did this to you? The ones I'm supposed to slay. You'll know in the future, but Naruto-kun, she voiced out softly to the attentive jinchuriki. Be very careful of the fellow god slayers you'll cross path with, and most importantly stay safe, okay? Naruto stared at her silently for a couple of seconds. When will I see you again? I myself do not know. There is a limit to how much this corporeal form can do, and I've pretty much almost reached that limit. My guess is that I can only appear before you one last time, and then that's it. I won't be able to interact with the outside world ever again until I'm freed. You're my only hope, she added. Thank you, Akira. Akira smiled genuinely. No, Naruto Uzumaki, thank you. Year X 777. It happened out of nowhere. 9 massive surges of power flooded the world and threw Earthland into a state of disarray and chaos. People from all over the world, whether in the highest peak in the largest mountain or on the normal streets of a peaceful town, all felt it. It mattered not whether one was an average day citizen or be they the toughest mage the lands had to offer. Almost all reeled back in fright. Fortunately, the different surges of power vanished, leaving many to wonder if they imagined the whole experience. In Era, the Magic Council panicked and shouted at one another as they argued about the cause of the sudden upsurge of strength. Far away into the oceans and in an isolated island, a raven-haired man cried tears of joy as he sensed the potential of his death increase by quite a bit. It was clear to all the beings in the world that something has changed. So this is Earthland. Already I can tell that it's a much better world than the elemental nation, Kankuro remarked as he looked around the world he and his siblings got pulled into. I'm just glad that we hugged you quickly when you starting glowing white Gaara. We are not okay with you being in a different world by yourself, Tamari said as she continued hugging her youngest sibling. What she said, Gaara? Kankuro exclaimed with a small smile. Gaara smiled back. Thank you, Tamari, Kankuro. Well, I don't know about you both, but I'd like to find out where we are, Tamari said as she let go of the jinchuriki. The siblings looked around and Gaara spotted a sign above his sister's head. It read Harjin Town. He murmured softly. Tamari glanced around the town and nodded satisfyingly. This place is really beautiful. I wouldn't mind living here. Already I can tell that it's much better compared to when we were in Sanagakure. She smiled and nodded at a couple of civilians who smiled and waved in their direction. Kankuro chuckled. I agree, sister, but let's take this one step at a time. We must first find out more about the world we live in, but with that being said, I too have no issue with us having a home here. What do you think, Gaara? Well, we won't accomplish anything by standing here. Let's check out this Harjin town, but only after we're done eating. Gaara swiftly walked towards the restaurant advertising a blueberry pie, his curiosity and interest piqued by the strange-looking food. Kankuro and Tamari quickly followed after them, Konkuro in particular stealthily nabbing the wallet of the fool ogling his sister as they walked past him. Tamari deadpanned Konkuro, "We haven't been here for 5 minutes and already you stole someone's wallet. Not my fault that the asshat was ogling you. That should teach him to not stare at you the way he did. Besides, we need money in order to pay for the food." Konkuro swiftly defended himself. "Or are you telling me that we were going to dine and dash in the first restaurant we sit in? If you ask me, I think Konkuro did the right thing. That guy can go to hell." Gaara gave his brother a thumbs up. Konkuro grinned smugly towards his sister. "Is there anything else you want to say?" Tamari looked at him blankly before she smirked. "Nice makeup." "It's war paint." XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX looked to him. He was a man, right? My name is Bob. I am the master of the guild Blue Pegasus. My dearies. Bob cooed very enthusiastically and clapped his hands together. Killer Bee grinned at the beautiful specimen of a human being in his eyes. Blue Pegasus sounded like his kind of place. I'm Killer Bee, don't mess with me, otherwise I'll make you feel wee. Yugito felt the urge to smack her fellow jinchuriki and just barely resisted. She rolled her eyes at her friend and turned towards the strange but friendly-looking man. My name is Yugito Ni and I have to ask you to forgive my very eccentric friend. His mother dropped him on his head as a child, that's why he's like this. Bob giggled. Oh, it's no problem, my dear. I actually find this man's behavior and stunningly unique looks quite fetching. He giggled some more and Yugito couldn't help but sigh as she noticed the grin on Killer Bee's face. See Yugito, only you don't rhyme. That's why I need to get you some lime. Bee voiced out passionately. The two-tails jinchuriki felt a vein bulge on her forehead. She turned towards her fellow shinobi with a very sweet look and Bee cringed heavily as he knew what came next. Wow, cute and short, you're so my type of man. A beautiful lady of average height with chestnut brown hair and sparkling emerald eyes commented as she gazed into Yagura's fiery pink orbs. She found him to be quite curious. One moment walking normally while contemplating about her lack of a love life, then seeing a handsome yet tiny midget appear before her eyes. To say he caught her eye was an understatement. Who are you calling short, you buffoon? I may be short but I am very powerful and am older than you. Yagura returned her gaze with fierce intensity, his agitation growing as the woman he stumbled on starting giggling at him. I'm sorry for the rudeness. I seem to have forgotten my manners by just being around you. My name is Fonda Rose. She introduced herself and Yagura suppressed a blush as his eyes averted to her bountiful chest for a split second before he caught himself. I am Yagura Karatachi. Wonderful. Fonda exclaimed passionately, much to the shinobi's confusion. Now that introductions are out of the way, let's fight till we drop. That way we can find out who's more powerful between the two of us. After that I'm sure you and I can get to know one another very well. Her insinuation was quite clear as she winked, much to mortification of the blushing fourth Mizukage. Do you not have any shame? Fonda grinned. Shame? Why, I've never heard of the word. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX green robes and are meditating. Roshi thought curiously as he walked around the interior of the building. Of all the places he expected to be when he started to glow white, ending up in an isolated room with just a bed and a few books is not what he had in mind. Leaving said room and coming across many men and women meditating and praying had Roshi feeling a bit curious. Who exactly did they worship here? Were they even worshipping someone? Or was this act of prayer that they all performed involved self-love and self-worship? The only figure Roshi recalled that people ever prayed to back in the elemental nation was the Shinigami, and it was a very scarce amount of those who chose to pray to him. He certainly teleported in a nice but strange place, he wasn't complaining. First time in here, brother. Roshi turned around and was met with the sight of a muscular bald man with a goatee clad in white robes approaching him. I'm afraid so. If it's no inconvenience for you, then would you mind telling me where I am? The bald man smiled lightly and nodded. It's no inconvenience at all. This place right here is the church, and in here we worship the Water God Slayer. Roshi raised an eyebrow. Water God Slayer. The man chuckled and nodded. Oh, where are my manner? My name is Jasmeet Khan, and the Water God Slayer is the one we worship here in this church. Her name is Zara and she's our goddess of peace. Peace. That was a concept that Roshi could wholeheartedly get behind. Tell me more. Jasmeet smiled in response. Brother, you and I must find a table to sit at because I have a lot to share. Now it was Roshi's turn to smile. Already he could tell that his stay here in this world will be much, much better. Han made his way through the bustling streets of Era, ignoring the hushed whisper and surprised glances that came his way. Being large as he was and also being the jinchuriki of the five tails had Han placed in the center of attention wherever he was. It was the norm for him. He'd honestly find it strange if people weren't looking at him. Though if people weren't looking at him then, while true that he may find it strange, but he could see himself getting used to it. So lost in thought as he was, Han did not notice the young child before him until said child tapped his leg. Snapped out of his thoughts, he came to a stop and gazed at the one responsible for returning to the outside world, a curious young lad that seemed to be about 7 or perhaps 8 years old. He knelt down to be at eye level with the cute child, an auburn hair-colored boy with innocent brown eyes. Excuse me, mister, but are you with the Rune Knights? You look super big and strong, so it only makes sense that you're with them. Han couldn't help the pride he felt at the words of the young child before him. He chuckled slightly, then ruffled the boy's hair. I'm afraid that I'm not with them, son, but if they are as cool as you make them out to be, then I should probably join. The boy rapidly nodded his head. Yeah, they're super cool, sir. In fact, they are, Jason. The boy immediately paled and turned around slowly to look at his mother. Han looked curiously at the woman and quelled the urge to whistle. She was tall for a woman, standing at about 5'9", possessing waist-length wavy purple hair that framed a heart-shaped face. Voluptuous she was, Han noted, but he found her most dizzying feature to be her sharp charcoal-colored eyes. How many times have I told you to not run off like that, young man? You have to be very, very careful. The woman scolded her son and he deflated a bit before perking up. But mama, I was talking to this super big muscly guy, Jason said while gesturing to the man behind him. Han tried and failed miserably to suppress his smile. And I was telling him about how the Rune Knights are so cool and how he should join them. The mother turned towards the man and gasped as she gazed at one of the largest men she'd ever seen in her life, possibly the largest, but something about him screamed gentle giant to her. She offered him a small smile. I'm sorry about my son, sir. He can be a bit of a knucklehead, I'm afraid. My name is Olivia and my son is Jason. Han smiled back. No apologies are necessary, Miss Olivia. I'm Han and I found your son to be a sparkling conversationalist. Because of him I have decided to join the Rune Knights. She giggled. This is the first time I hear that my son is a sparkling conversationalist. He takes after his mother, I believe. He flirted with her. Olivia felt her cheeks tint pink. Okay, Olivia, you got this. You flirted with many men before Jason was born, remember. This should be a piece of cake. I hope he takes after you with the super big muscly body. She cringed on the inside. Never had she embarrassed herself like this. Yukata looked curiously at the horned masked demon before him. She looked pretty. Pretty in a I'm going to kill you sort of way. He also couldn't help but note that she was rather busty. Who are you? Even her voice sounded like silk. Soothing and blissful to hear despite the rage that lurked within her tone. I'm Yukata. Who are you? She bristled. The name is Kyoka of the 9 Demon Gates. I'd watch your words, boy. He looked at her flatly. My words are normal, Kyoka-chan. Kyoka barely reined in her fury. She needed to find out who this human was and why he gave of a demon-like aura. Attacking him was not an option, even though it would be incredibly pleasing to hurt him. And as much as it hurt her pride to admit, Kyoka could already tell that she was hilariously outclassed if the way her danger senses were flaring madly just by being around this man. Not mentioning that she could sense his power and the quantity of it was massive. Attacking him would lead to her downfall. Kyoka wasn't even sure if even the entirety the 9 Demon Gates banded together could win against him. She needed to be smart with her approach. How did you appear here and what are your intentions? She asked a bit more softly. Someone teleported me here by chance, and my intentions. Honestly, I have no idea what to do with my life, though a comfy bed with some food and water sounds lovely. He shrugged his shoulders. Interesting. So there is a possibility to bring him over to our side, a possibility I must definitely exploit. She noticed his eyes dart quickly towards her large round sensors and she couldn't help but smile. Seemed her womanly charms would play a big role in convincing him to join. Well, I believe I can help with that, Yukata-kun. She purred much to his amusement. Come follow me. She walked past him and he followed her. Yukata felt a flush involuntarily creep up on his cheeks as he easily noticed that Kyoka's ass was mostly bare, 2 big mounds of flesh that rippled with every step she took. So lost was he in admiring her fat swaying rump that he didn't realize Kyoka looked back at him with a sultry smug smirk, thoroughly satisfied with the conclusion that she had him in the palm of her talons, or rather between the large globes of her expansive bubble butt. Kyoka barely quelled the urge to chuckle at the thought. He was more powerful than Marred Gear, and by extension that made Kyoka more powerful than Marred Gear. With Tartarus under my command, we will surely be able to become strong enough to eventually kill Lord Zareth. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX live your life. Makarov couldn't help but question the group of 4 men that stood before him. It seemed like these guys were unaware of who he was and were delighted to try and rob him. "Shut it, old man. Just give us the money, otherwise it won't end well for you," the one furthest to the left called out. Makarov sighed, looking at them with great swells of pity and remorse. How sad it was for their lives to revolve around stealing from the old and weak. Such a waste of potential and spirit, he thought regretfully. At least he tried to reason with them. The guy all the way at the back grew angry at Makarov for being slow and started to advance to him, rolling up his sleeves and getting ready to break the short elderly man's nose for wasting their time. "Leave the old man alone," Fu yelled as she jumped off the roof to deliver a spinning kick to the guy who was advancing menacingly towards the elderly. Her yelling caught the man off guard as he turned, and he was launched back as the kick connected with his face and knocked him unconscious. Getting over the shock of watching one of their own getting knocked down by a preteen girl, the other 3 men instantly moved towards her, ready to teach her a lesson for interfering in their business, and they found themselves stuck courtesy of a giant hand that held them all in place. Looking at the origin of the extremely large hand, all 3 assailants found their eyes darting to the short old man they were pestering. Makarov glared at them. "It's one thing when you choose to attack me, but to attack a little girl." Power exploded around the short wizard saint. A fiery overwhelming aura of white that split the ground, caused many small hurricanes to form, and would have brought down the trembling men to their knees had Makarov not held them in place. "I draw the line there." With the same hand that held the assailants, Makarov raised his enlarged arm and threw or more like smashed the 3 remaining attackers on the ground, instantly breaking some bones and sending them to a state unconsciousness much like their 4th member. Makarov glared at the downed men with disgust. How repulsive. His arm returning back to its normal size, he turned towards the girl that came to his defense and his eyes softened. "Thank you, little miss, for coming to save me. My name is Makarov Drayar. What's your name if you don't me asking?" Fu looked at the short man with admiration in her eyes. What he did was so cool. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Makarov. I'm Fu and you don't have to thank me. It was the right thing to do, you know. Can't exactly watch a defenseless old man take on 4 jerks, except you weren't defenseless and I thought you were amazing and everything." She rambled on a bit nervously. Makarov let out a deep bellyful of laughter. "Please don't call me Mr. Just Makarov or old man or even Gramps." Fu grinned cheerfully. "Thank you again for trying to save me and thank you for the nice compliments. I'm afraid it's been a while since I last heard any coming my way." "It's no probs, Gramps. You looked pretty wicked throwing 3 grown men on the floor so easily. Where are you from anyway?" she asked inquisitively. The elderly wizard saint smiled. "I'm from Fairy Tale." "Fairy Tale?" she murmured interestedly. He nodded. "It's a guild where people can find job requests, take missions and earn money. But more than that, it's a place where people come to make friends, be part of a family, and to have a never-ending adventure." Fu had stars in her eyes. "It sounds exactly like my kind of place." Makarov grinned. Looks like he had another brat to look and care for. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX internally as he walked through the desolate snow-filled forest. He looked around and all he could see through the harsh blizzard was flakes of snow piling on everything till all his surroundings had deep layers of snow to it. No matter where he glanced he found all the environment to be the same. He sighed and continued to walk. Not exactly how he envisioned his first visit to this world would be like. Naruto continued to walk for a long while, A few hours passed by and he found himself getting tired of just walking through this maze. Starved and cold as he was, one could forgive him for being in a foul mood. Fortunately, just before he could lose his sanity, he spotted a large cabin in the middle of a snow-decorated clearing and headed there swiftly. Standing before the wooden door, Naruto knocked and waited for the occupant of the house to reveal themselves. With any luck, said occupant of the cabin might be merciful and welcome the young blonde inside. He hoped. The shinobi didn't have to wait long as he heard the sound of boots trampling on the floor echoing and becoming louder by the second. The door opened wide and Naruto found himself gazing at what was most definitely the tallest man he had ever seen in his life. The giant had to be at least 8 feet something tall, and as he towered over the short blonde, Naruto found himself relieved that he at least wasn't built like the famed Raikage of Kumo. Despite not having that sort of build, Naruto could easily see the muscles that bulged through the man's blue sweater. Majestic coffee-colored hair fell down elegantly from his head down to his mid-back. Naruto noted glowing amber eyes shaped like jewels. Cool but a bit strange, he found. The tall man possessed a pale complexion, and it only seemed to enhance the look of his long, gracefully braided beard swaying with the winds of the snow blizzard. All in all, the man looked like a regal, powerful entity who could easily snap him in half. "Hello, young one. Do you seek shelter from the storm outside?" Naruto nodded. "Yes, please." The towering man stepped aside to let him in. The shinobi wasted no time and headed inside immediately, making sure to thank the man as he did so for his kindness. "It was of no consequence, young one. If I can help someone, then I will. My name is Tear." The giant introduced himself. "Naruto Uzumaki," he said slowly. Tear nodded. "Well, it's nice to meet you, Naruto. I do imagine that you're cold and that you must be starving, so please, follow me." Tear promptly headed towards the living room where the fireplace was located. He had the blonde sit on the seat close to the wooden stove to warm himself, and in the meantime decided to make dinner for both him and his unexpected resident today. It was perhaps 15 minutes later that Tear returned to the blonde and found his eyes softening at the scene of the blonde boy just sitting patiently next to the fireplace. "Naruto, I made us some food. Come join me and let us feast tonight." He placed the food on the table and shifted the table closer towards the wood stove so they could still be warm. He sat at the table and the jinchuriki got up and joined him. "Thank you, Tear," he mumbled quietly. Tear smiled. "As I said earlier, I'm happy to help." They ate quietly and savored their meal, Naruto finding the food to be especially delightful as his eyes watered slightly from the delicious cooking. "It's mushroom beef stew, if you're wondering. A personal favorite of mine, as it is quite delicious and has lots and lots of nutrients," Tear remarked helpfully, easily noticing the effect his food had on his guest. Naruto hummed approvingly. "I like it." Tear chuckled slightly. "I am glad it was to your liking, but Naruto." The shinobi glanced at the towering figure with no small amounts of confusion and inquisitiveness. "Do you have any family or close friends? And if you do, then when do you plan to return to them?" Naruto frowned. "I don't have a family to return to, and I don't have a lot of friends." Tear internally cringed as he gazed at the young blonde. He looked to be about 12 years old and he had no one to care for him. What had the world come into? "If you don't mind me asking, why exactly were you out there during that storm?" he asked gently. "I want to become stronger. The village I lived in, the residents of that village weren't very enthusiastic about helping me become strong." "And why do you wish to become strong?" Tear questioned, making sure to stay away from any personal or sensitive topics. Naruto didn't have to think hard about this. "So that I can protect the people whom are precious to me from harm." Tear was impressed with the boy's answer. Of all the answers he was expecting to hear, this by far was what surprised and stunned him. To be so young yet give such an intelligent and mature answer, this boy has potential, Tear mused. Perhaps it was fate that brought a boy with no family towards him, a man who also possessed no family alive to speak of. Naruto thirsted for power and fate brought the boy to him. Tear was by no means arrogant or full of himself, but that didn't mean he wasn't capable of acknowledging that he was an extremely powerful mage. It was an enormous perhaps, but Naruto could have been brought here so that he could train the boy and turn him into a powerful warrior. But was it right to do so? Already Naruto suffered enough from what he could see, and by taking him on as a disciple, he'd further rob the blonde from some of the experiences that life had to offer. But he supposed that such a choice in the end was for the young blonde to decide. "Naruto, How do you feel about me taking you on as a student and training you to become a powerful mage and warrior? That caught the jinchuriki off guard. Well, perhaps a demonstration of my abilities is required. Tear interrupted gently. Naruto nodded apologetically. Well, for now let's continue to enjoy our feast, have a good night rests afterward, then I can show you my power first thing in the morning. Sorry if I offended you, Tear. Naruto apologized, feeling guilty for unintentionally insulting the man after he welcomed him inside and gave him food to eat. There is nothing to apologize for, young one. It is only logical that you'd wish to assess my combat capability when I'd make such an offer. He waved off the apology. Now let's eat and don't be shy about grabbing another bowl of mushroom beef stew. Thank you, Tear. Naruto grabbed himself another bowl and internally thanked Akira for sending him here. 7 months had passed since Naruto wandered into the cabin of the towering titan of a man who he would come to see as his sensei. Life for the blonde had changed drastically since then, it showed clearly in his appearance. No longer did the young shinobi look malnourished and scrawny, instead he filled out with muscles that complemented his appearance well while also growing to a more respectable height of 5 feet 2, 157.5 centimeters. His visage was still marred with baby fat, but in comparison to before he met Tear, he looked a lot sharper and less like a child despite being only 13 years old. Those were the more obvious changes that showed since he arrived to Earthland. But perhaps the biggest change in the Jinchuriki's eyes was that he no longer lived alone, that he wasn't alone. Living with Tear was an initially awkward phase for him since he didn't know how to behave or act accordingly when in one's home, but the tall man seemed to understand his predicament because he helped ease the blonde into his new home. Naruto could freely admit to himself that he didn't fully trust the extremely gracious and humble man from the start. How could he be blamed for not having faith when many of those he trusted were the type to abandon or use him for their own selfish purposes? After such experiences, he just could not allow himself to wholeheartedly trust someone. It was better that to just keep people at a distance, avoid any nasty or bitter surprises, he reasoned to himself. But as the weeks rolled into months, Naruto found himself slowly having more and more faith in Tear's character, and before he even knew it, fully trusted Tear with his life. That wasn't to say that he did nothing to help repay the towering man for his generosity. On the contrary, when the young shinobi wasn't training with Tear, he'd go out looking for herbs and hunting for food to bring back to the cabin. He made sure to pull his weight rather than to be completely dependent on his sensei. But his sensei was a slave driver. Naruto both loved and hated that quality about him. Tear didn't possess any magical ability to speak of, but what made him so powerful was that he was so strong that he could shatter a giant boulder with one punch. Couple that with his absolutely insane speed and his unparalleled fighting technique and you have a monster of a warrior even without magic. He was basically the might guy of Earthland. That was the best way the young shinobi could describe him, a carbon copy of Might Guy but just without his eccentricities and the flames of youth. Every day spent with Tear for the last 7 months had been spent on training his body to be an effective and durable weapon. He was made to do all forms of exercises that exerted heavily on his muscles to force them to grow, and before he knew it, he was compiling heavy weights on his body when performing those exercises. But the torture didn't end there. Only after he thoroughly exhausted his body and muscles with his new training regimen did Tear have him train in hand-to-hand combat. Saying he got humbled was putting it lightly. Tear wasn't impressed with Naruto's brawler style. As a master of several martial arts, he felt that he needed to bleach his eyes when witnessing the young's blonde atrocious fighting style. He simply could not allow his new student and apprentice to continue fighting in such a way. As such, he spent the last 7 months reconstituting the blonde's combat style. There was nothing that Tear focused on more than making sure that his student knew how to fight properly, how to throw a punch and kick with the correct form, how to dodge, parry and weave through attacks. Before teaching him any martial art styles, he had to make sure that he knew the basics well. And for the first 3 months, that's all the young shinobi practiced, the basics of the basics and becoming a master at it. After that, Tear started teaching his student different types of hand-to-hand combat. Skip 4 months since then and Tear felt nothing but pride at how far the blonde had come in terms of his hand-to-hand skills. There was still much room for improvement, however that principle applied to all including himself, but his student in comparison to 7 months ago was much different and a much more adequate fighter. But while the young shinobi made great strides in his health and in his taijutsu, his mentality and feelings towards people didn't improve and instead it soured. Having someone like Tyr in his life made him compare the towering giant to every figure back in Konoha in regards to how they treated him, and Naruto easily found out that there was simply no comparison in how Tyr treated him compared to almost everyone else back in his former home. It made the feelings of anger and bitterness that he felt deep down evolve. If there ever was a part of him that wanted to return to live back in Konoha, and he knew that there was, it died down with the realization that a single person he met 7 months ago showed him more care and kindness than everyone he knew combined. Yes, Tyr didn't know about him having a demon sealed in his guts, but Naruto was almost fully certain that if he revealed that secret that he wouldn't be hated and scorned the way the people of Konoha did to him. The fact was, he only ever saw himself returning to put an end to the Akatsuki and to protect the few remaining people he still cared about. Beyond that, he saw no other reason to return and stay there. Konohagakure wasn't his home. My home is in Earthland, with Tyr-sensei. Naruto weaved his head and torso to the left to dodge the palm strikes sent by his teacher. The only thing that Naruto wished could have changed would be him having the time to dabble and train in God Slayer magic. But he wasn't in a rush to fight against gods, so he supposed taking things one step at a time was ideal and smart. Retaliating with a cross that would make a full-grown man see stars, Naruto was promptly disappointed as Tyr sidestepped and threw a kick that would have caught him in the head had he not jumped back to avoid the strike. Tyr quickly regained his balance and leapt at the shinobi with a jab that Naruto parried before throwing a left hook meant to bury itself in the taller man's liver. Tyr with astonishing speed grabbed the aggressive limb before it could accomplish its task and used it lift his pupil's body overhead before slamming him on the floor behind him.
He swiftly knelt on the floor and had his fist placed on his student's Adam apple, signifying the end of their sparring match. Getting up, he offered his hand towards his downed student, who grabbed it and pulled him on his feet. You fight really well, Naruto. You are far stronger than I was when I was your age. Tyr gazed at his student with pride, internally chuckling at the embarrassed yet pleased look gracing the shinobi's visage. Naruto crossed his arms and looked away. I'm just lucky that I have a good teacher. While having a good teacher does help, the progress made to better yourself is ultimately upon you, and that's how you've come so far in such little time, Naruto. You are the one who put all that effort and dedication to improve. Thank you for the kind words, sensei. Tyr smiled. Of course, now let's retire back home. I believed we've trained more than enough for today. As usual, he walked back to the path that led to the cabin, followed closely by his student. A comfortable silence settled between them as they made their way home. Hey Tyr-sensei, the towering giant glanced inquisitively at his student. How are you so tall? Tyr exploded into small bursts of laughter, completely taken by surprise from the question asked from his usually silent apprentice. It took a few moments before he could rein in his chuckles to answer his student, mirth dancing in his eyes as he gazed at his only student. My parents are not from Fury, rather they come from a distant land called Hoya. The people there are very tall compared to everyone else from other lands. What is Hoya like, and have you ever been into other lands? Naruto asked curiously. Hoya is a peaceful land. The people there are all about giving second chances even when hurt painfully. The culture is all about forgiveness. I think you'll like it. As for other lands, yes, on my way to Fury I've been to Stella, Bosco, and Seven. I wasn't there long enough to learn their culture or traditions, but it is a dream of mine to explore all the lands and learn more about them. Indeed, something about seeing what all the world has to offer just appeals to me. What about you, Naruto? Wouldn't you like to know what the world outside this forest and outside your village is like? It does pique my curiosity, but right now my only priority is about becoming stronger.
Tyr frowned. Naruto, there should be more to your life than just training and becoming stronger. You should have friends, fun, happiness. Training shouldn't be your life. But sensei, I am perfectly happy with what I already have in my life. I have you, and by training myself, I'll eventually have the power to protect you and those I care about from harm. But what harm? I haven't asked out of respect for your privacy, young one, but the way you continuously push yourself to keep training makes me think that someone is hunting you or trying to hunt those other people you care about. The older man sighed softly. I am happy to learn that you value me so much and believe me when I say that I feel the same way, but it's because I do that I want you to have more than just me in your life. Just entertain the thought, my precious apprentice, for my sake. Naruto nodded reluctantly. All right, I see no harm in thinking about this. Good. Though he may have sounded clipped, The pleased smile on Tyr's visage betrayed how he felt towards his student's response. They arrived at the cabin and went in, Naruto immediately heading to the shower to get rid of the stench of sweat that clung to his form. An hour had passed since then and Naruto found himself lying on his bed, a whirlwind of thoughts assaulting his brain and keeping him distracted from the outside world. His thoughts just couldn't seem to hold still, drifting from Tyr's request all the way to the gods he was supposed to slay for Akira, and thinking about Akira reminded him of Konoha, which in turn made him think of the beast sealed within him. I still haven't thanked Kyuubi for saving me all those months back. It should not have taken me this long. Naruto closed his eyes from guilt. He opened them moments later and sighed before resolving to apologize to the beast when he'd see him later tonight. He will talk to him tonight. Before the shinobi could sink further into his musing, he heard his name get called out by the only other occupant of the house and promptly got up, heading downstairs to talk with his sensei. Yes, Tyr-sensei? The shinobi voiced out once he reached the kitchen. Food is ready, young one. Come help me put the food and plates on the table. Complying at once, Naruto helped his mountain of a sensei with laying everything on the table. Once finished, Tyr sat at the head of the table and Naruto joined him on his right. For the next few minutes they ate their dinner in comfortable silence. It wasn't until Naruto finished 3/4 of his plate that Tyr spoke. So I've thought about this for quite some time and I've decided that you and I can benefit from interacting with other people rather than just each other. That's why tomorrow morning we'll leave and settle near the closest town. The shinobi looked at his teacher with no small amounts of confusion. But Tyr-sensei, why? They'll just be a waste of our time. I don't really see the value in interacting with other people. And that is why I want us to go, young one, because you shouldn't see being around other people as a waste of time, he replied back calmly. I get that you care about my social life, but how does being around others benefit me? Tyr laid his fork down gently and wiped the side of his lips with a napkin before he replied. Because you get far in life thanks to people. Everyone has something to offer to you, something to help or teach you. Did you know that the day we first met, there was a part of me that debated against training you? Naruto's eyes widened in slight surprise. I did not know that. A look of unease crossed his features. So why was there a part of you that didn't want to train me? The older of the two men laid his hand on his apprentice's shoulder. Because by training you the way I did, I robbed you of the opportunity to make more friends, of finding peace and comfort with strangers that you would come to eventually see as your family. But I did find peace and comfort with you, sensei. I am content with this life. But I am not Naruto. I want you to have friends your age who you can just laugh and talk with. I want you to be spending time just having fun rather than what we've been doing the past 7 months. What if something happened to me? You'd be alone and that's not what I want for you. Naruto narrowed his eyes and crossed his arms. But that's only more reason why I must become stronger, to prevent something from happening to you. A regretful smile painted Tyr's visage. No matter how strong you become, you can't always protect and save the people you care about. That's the reality of life, Naruto. But, do it for me. Tyr gently interrupted. That's all I ask of you. Naruto pursed his lips before nodding. Alright, but don't expect me to make friends when we move to the nearest town. Tyr smiled and gripped his student's shoulder warmly before getting up to place his plate in the sink and walk out the room, leaving the blonde to finish his meal quietly. Once done, he returned to his room and laid at his mattress, his body sinking into soft cushion of his bed and causing the shinobi to feel sleepy. No, not yet. I still have something I need to do. With a small breath, Naruto was pulled into his consciousness. Naruto's mindscape. The familiar and unpleasant scenery resembling a sewer welcomed the young Jinchuriki. He peered around and spotted the large golden gates that caged the beast who was in him from the day he was born. He walked towards the cage, weariness filling his being as oceanic blue orbs met and conversed with demonic red. So, my jailer has come to grace me with his presence after all this time. Why have you come here, brat? Naruto gazed at the Kyuubi, eyes drinking in the sight of the massive 9-tailed fox beast laying there on its paws just staring at him. It would have made for an intimidating sight for anyone else but him. He'd seen the beast more than enough times to not feel threatened by it. To say thank you. What? The strongest of the Biju blinked his eyes in surprise before he narrowed them at the blonde. And why are you thanking me? Speak, human. I should have thanked you months ago for saving my life against my former teammate. I just figured I'd get it over with and thank you now. The young jinchuriki just shrugged his shoulder casually. The Kyuubi scoffed. I didn't do it for you, in case you've forgotten, brat. If you die then I die. I only saved you to save myself. Naruto just blankly continued gazing at the eyes of the strongest Biju. I haven't forgotten that, but the fact is that if not for you I would be dead. So I am grateful to you regardless of your reasons for saving me. HMPH. At least you're better mannered compared to before. Regardless though, your presence annoys me. Leave. The Nine-Tails Fox ordered. Naruto willed himself to disappear, form fading away right before the Kyuubi's eyes until he was no more. The strongest Biju closed his eyes. Silly human, do you not understand that I am hatred given form? XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX times skip. 5 months. X 778. 100,000 jewels for a simple protection job. I am not complaining that we're making big money on easy job requests like these. Kankuro grinned as he held up the bag containing all that money up to his eyes. The Sand siblings had just finished their latest mission from Onibu's town and had been for the better part of the day just walking back to Harjin. The 3 of them could have taken the train, but they just preferred walking back on foot to enjoy the scenery. Temari rolled her eyes. Can you stop smiling like an idiot? You look bad enough as it is with all the makeup, but smiling somehow makes it all worse. Kankuro felt his eyebrow twitch and glared at his sister. How many times do I have to tell you that it's war paint? The blonde woman scoffed. And how many times do I have to tell you that it's not? Gaara rolled his eyes. Can you both stop fighting about this? Seriously, it's getting on my nerves. And Kankuro. Said man glanced at his younger brother. Yes. The youngest of the 3 sighed. You can keep the war paint if you want, but you need to change your clothes. We keep getting weird looks because of your fashion taste. Kankuro felt his face go red and Temari immediately burst out laughing, lungs in pain from how hard she was guffawing. You could not have worded this gentler. As for you. The puppet user's eyes drifted to his sister. Be quiet. Temari managed, albeit with great difficulty, to quell her snickers. Don't worry, Kankuro, as your dear older sister I will take you shopping once we arrive home. The puppet user just HMPHED, much to his siblings' amusement. Though he tried to subdue the urge, even Kankuro couldn't help but smile alongside his brother and sister. The amusement quickly faded from their eyes as they arrived to Harjin and found it to be suspiciously empty and silent. An extremely rare occurrence for the normally bustling and vibrant town. Gaara looked at his siblings and they nodded, quickly jumping to the rooftops of a building. They split up in search of life, each wondering what happened to the place in their absence. The youngest of the Sand sibling leapt from one building to another, eyes darting everywhere in hopes of locating at least one single person. Harjin wasn't the largest of towns in Fury, but it was fairly sizable. It was impossible for there to not be a single person roaming the streets unless something extremely drastic happened. Like a dark guild attacking. Gaara sensed the large flare of chakra at the direction Temari headed. Whirling around, he made a beeline towards the energy output he sensed and was quickly joined by Kankuro. It took around 30 seconds till they made it to their sister, but the sight they came across rendered them speechless. The entire population of Harjin were found all in the large plaza in the distant corner of their town. A population of 60,000, all located and surrounded by roughly around 300 mages. Dark Guild. Gaara noted disgustedly. Though the population of Harjin largely dwarfed the numbers of members belonging to a Dark Guild, numbering around 60,000. One had to remember that the population of Harjin consisted of children, the elderly, people with injuries, etc. That was not mentioning that there was not a single mage among the entire population. Against a Dark Guild who thrived on hurting and killing others. Despite the vast differences in number, it was simply not a fair fight for the people of Harjin. Temari, Kankuro, go on either side of the masses and get ready to defend them the moment anyone attacks the civilian. The one-tailed Jinchuriki ordered. Both his siblings nodded and leapt away quickly. Gentlemen. One dark-haired mage called out, flying high to be seen by the masses of civilians before him, evidently the guild master of the rowdy crew. Seeing as though there are way too many people, start escorting only the most beautiful of women to our ship. As for the rest, do with them as you would like. Let the world know not to mess with the Dark Guild Dark Unicorn. His declaration had all the Dark Guild members grin bloodthirstily while the population of Harjin erupted with screams and shouts of obscenity. You can't do that. What type of monsters are you? Please spare us. Leave our women alone, you censored ing creeps. Plenty more yelling emerged from the enormous crowd. The leader of Dark Unicorn gritted his teeth in rage. Silence! He thundered, quieting the vast mass instantly. Raising a hand to the sky, he formed a massive fireball which he threw promptly at one part of the crowd, an attack that would no doubt incinerate hundreds. The civilians screamed but were unable to escape, only capable of watching the attack descend on them while the dark mages watched cruelly with sadistic satisfaction. A large wall of sand appeared from nowhere and shielded the throng of civilians from the attack, much to their awe. The sand wall deformed and then headed straight for the mage responsible for the fireball, wrapping around him and gripping the mage's body tightly, judging by the pained screams emanating from him. The civilians, the dark mages, and even the 2/3 of the Suna siblings, they all watched quietly as the sand then flung the leader of Dark Unicorn hard to the ground, sending him to the land of unconsciousness. Unless you value your lives, you will surrender and leave the people of Harjin alone, Gaara said as he landed in between the people of Harjin and the mages in front of him. One random mage, blue-haired in appearance, raised a finger and pointed it at him. You may have beaten our leader Lashvi, but there is no way you alone could take on all of us. The dark mage grinned while gesturing towards his chuckling guildmates. Gaara shook his head while a small smug smile plucked at the corner of his lips. Then I suppose it's a good thing that I'm not alone. Right after he said that, a blast of wind slammed into a large number of mages and sent them flying into a building. The onslaught against the mages of Dark Unicorn didn't end there as 3 demonic puppets burst from the ground and grabbed a hold of a wizard on either side of their mechanical arms. The puppets spun rapidly, their arms stretching and expanding until they used the wizards they grabbed a hold of as bats to hurt and smash the mages into their fellow guildmates. What are you all doing? Get them and kill them all. The wizard from earlier yelled hysterically. At his command, all the mages not hurt from the surprised attacks sprang forth, every one of them eager to hurt the red-haired mage who stopped and halted their plans by interfering the way he did. The masses of civilians flinched and reeled back. Gaara paid them no heed as he summoned a massive tsunami of sand that casted a shadow over the members of Dark Unicorn. The wizards stopped in their track and started to backpedal in order to get away. Their effort were for naught as the tsunami came crashing down on the members of Dark Unicorn, drowning them and taking out 200 of them in one fell swoop. Did you see that? That was amazing. We're saved. The muttering of awe-struck civilians danced past Gaara's ears as he glared at the remaining wizards standing who planned on committing mass genocide. Before the blue-haired mage could fire another order, he was barreled from behind by one of the demonic puppets from earlier who, along with its siblings, started to viciously attack the nearby mages. The wizards far away from the puppets formed magic circles in order to kill the puppets, not caring that their fellow guildmates were in the crossfire of their attack. Before they could fire their magic, they were assaulted by blasts of winds courtesy of Tamari, who made good use of her giant iron fan. Gaara joined in on the bombardments of attacks, and within a minute, the fear-gripping number of 300 dark mages were reduced to a pathetic whimpering one. "I surrender." The lone standing wizard stuttered shakily, his legs quivering as Gaara slowly walked towards him, flanked by Tamari and Konkoro, who gazed at him apathetically. The people of Harjin watched with bated breath as the lone mage was then knocked unconscious by Tamari, who was none too amused by their initial intentions to capture women and take them as slaves. Off to the side, Lashvi woke up and glared hatefully at the 3 responsible for his failed mission. He refused to allow them to make a mockery of their guild, of making a mockery of him. You think you have won? Well, think again, because I will show you just how much of a pathetic failure you really are. Watch me kill these useless pile of bones. Lashvi shifted his attention to the townspeople and grinned darkly. Getting up, the leader of Dark Unicorn screamed and ran towards the masses of people, his form glowing white as he used his body as an explosive lacrima substitute. More than thrilled to kill as many civilians as he could. The civilians at the very front screamed in abject horror as the Dark Wizards was only 3 meters away from them. They all without exception closed their eyes instinctively, none believing for even a second that they would survive from a human bomb only 10 feet away. A loud explosion rang past their ears, opening their eyes fearfully after a couple of seconds of nothing happening. The large crowd of people instantly noticed the massive wall of sand before them. Did that save us? Mother! We're alive. Never will I continue living as a drunk ever again. Thank God for this miracle. The entire population of the town watched on as the massive sand wall then decomposed and faded away right before their very eyes. Expecting to see destruction and rubble on the side of the wall, the people were instead surprised to see the town intact and a small sand dome encompassing where the leader of the Dark Mage formerly stood. People of Harjin. Gaara stood tall and unflinching as the attention of the world fixated on him. You are no longer in danger or captivity. You all are free. A few moments of silence encompassed the land. The inhabitants of the town then exploded with a large cheer, much to Gaara's complete and utter surprise. He looked on confusedly as the people rushed to gather around him, voices overlapping with one another and causing him to look at his siblings unsurely, much to their amusement. The city of Era held the prestige and honor of housing the Magic Council and being the main headquarters of the Rune Knights. It was a thriving city bustling with festivities and business. With the knowledge of knowing that no sane person would dare to cause trouble lest they wish to be apprehended, the populace of Era felt as safe and calm as ever. The same could not be said for the esteemed representatives of the Magic Council as they gathered solemnly to address their concerns. The ruling body of the magic world were anything but composed as they yelled at one another, voices overlapping and frustrating the chairman of the council. Enough. Crawford bellowed, instantly quieting the room and silencing his fellow members. He watched as they all sat into their seats slowly. I understand that this matter is most upsetting and it is expected that people dealing with such matters would become frustrated, but we are the Magic Council. The chairman peered at each of them one by one. We must be able to handle these distressing affairs with a touch of class and grace. It is what is expected of us, so please, fellow councilmen, behave accordingly. Org coughed. May I speak, Chairman Crawford? Crawford nodded. Go ahead. More than a year has passed since the 9 bursts of tremendous power was felt by all of Fury, quite possibly even the entire world. Despite our intense searching, we still have not found any sorts of peculiarities. Yes, we all are aware of the facts. What's your point? Michello rudely interrupted. The chairman shot him a warning look, less than amused with the unprofessionalism. Org watched with satisfaction as the short man cowered and sunk into his seat. My point is, we haven't been able to determine the cause of the surges, but we can demonstrate our strength against this potential enemy. His statement roused the curiosity of the occupants of the room. Muffled whispers and chattering filled the chambers as they contemplated and discussed Org's suggestion. Hush. At the sound of the chairman's voice, the room quieted down once more. I'd like for you to elaborate on that point, Councilman Org. The nation of Fury looks to us for guidance when dealing with magic and power. We must show them that their faith in us is not misplaced. A show of strength will display to our enemies that we are not to be trifled with, while also renewing the faith that our people have in us. Crawford stroked his beard and considered his idea. He found himself nodding with his colleague's point. I agree with your suggestion, and from what it seems so does everyone else, he said, gesturing to the now smiling and relaxed members. Do you have anything you'd like to recommend or add? Org nodded. One suggestion would be to have a complete group of the 10 wizard saints. The elderly man ignored the surprised gasps as he locked eyes with the chairman. As of right now, the only ones possessing the title of a wizard saint would be the 4 gods of Ishgar, Makarov Dreyar, Jose Parla, and Juranikis. That's 7 out of 10 spots. But who could fill the remaining 3 spots? Belno, the lone female member of the council, asked. Ujima closed his eyes in deep thought. Someone very capable with a strong sense of morals and justice. Michello tossed a glance at the short elderly man, conveniently ignoring that he too was below average height. It sounds to me like you have someone in mind. Care to share? The former fairy tale member shook his head. I do have a potential candidate, but the issue lies in that he's a bit too young for such a responsibility, and while his current strength is impressive, it's still not worthy yet for the title of Wizard Saint, though given time I do believe that will change. Who is it? Leiji asked inquisitively. Ujima smiled genuinely. A young wizard by the name of Gaara. Known more commonly as one of the 3 heroes of Harjin, and also bestowed with the title, the Ultimate Defender, for the way he effectively saved the entire population of Harjin while also minimizing collateral damage. Org nodded approvingly. He's an impressive and very capable wizard for his age. He should definitely be considered for such a position in a few years. But that still leaves us with 2 remaining spots. Who can shoulder such responsibility? Yuri questioned no one in particular. What about Gildart's Clive? Leiji instantly regretted his suggestion as all the remaining members of the council looked him incredulously. How could you suggest that man? He is a very powerful wizard, there is no denying that, but have you forgotten just how much property damage that man causes? I've never in my entire life seen someone be that careless. Org pinched his nose in frustration. Belno frowned. Let's not forget that he's a shameless flirt. How many women has he slept with? We can't have someone like that on the group, it would dishonor the prestige that comes with being a wizard saint. Alright. Alright. I understand. Do remember that it was just a suggestion, but that does bring us back to our original question. Who can hold the title of a wizard saint? Lei Ji looked at his fellow council members expectantly. An uncomfortable silence reigned in as none of the members of the council could suggest another wizard. Crawford stroked his beard. A question for another day. I believe there are other ways to demonstrate our strength that doesn't rely on the wizard saints. We shouldn't be reliant on them all the time. Everyone nodded at that. We must show the world that messing with the Kingdom of Fury is the worst mistake they could ever make. Shinvania Town. It had been 5 months since Tyr proposed that they leave their home in the woods and join the nearby settlement. 5 months since the shinobi was once again reintroduced to the world of people outside the cabin that he came to associate with his home. Excluding Tyr, Naruto wasn't interested in having warm relations with anyone. It showed in his interactions with the townspeople. He was polite, cordial and friendly, yet he kept people at a distance, and any attempts made by people his age at being friends was shot down politely. The young shinobi was perfectly alright being on his own, he preferred it that way much to his sensei's inner frustration. The jinchuriki was currently found laying on the grass next to his temporary home, feeling content and at peace under the gaze of the 1,000 stars that lit the night. The blonde wasn't much of a stargazer, but he found comfort in being bathed by the light of the celestial bodies. It made the shinobi wonder if the stars in the elemental nation were remotely as beautiful as the stars here in Earthland. Hard to believe that I've been in this world for a whole year now. The young shinobi couldn't help but let his thoughts drift back to his old world. Did the tension between the nations worsen? Was the village of Konoha still standing? Were Jiraiya and Tsunade and everyone else he still cared for alive and safe? The more he thought about his old world, the more he felt unease as question after question assaulted him. Questions that he did not have an answer for. Though the good memories he possessed of his old world were largely overshadowed by the negative ones, it didn't change the fact that he still to some degree cared for his former home despite all the pain he went through. The last thing he wanted was for the elemental nation to be torn by conflict and misery more than it already had been. The lack of knowledge regarding the state of his precious people and his old world was frustrating him. Naruto breathed deeply. If I want answers, I must become strong. The sound of soft footsteps graced the blonde's ears. Naruto didn't have to turn around to know it was his master who decided to join him. Tyr sat down on the ground next to the blonde, eyes tilted upwards as he admired the view of the star-filled sky glowing brightly and shining its radiance on everything caught underneath its heavenly glare. A full minute of comfortable silence passed before Tyr decided to break the quiet. It's really beautiful, don't you think so, Naruto? Yes, it is, sensei. Tyr frowned softly. What's wrong, my precious apprentice? Something is clearly bothering you. Naruto sat up and tossed a glance at his sensei, mind filled with uncertainty as he considered whether he should divulge the truth about his origins or not. He trusted his teacher wholeheartedly, but the blonde couldn't help but worry about the way his master would take the news. The Jinchuriki remembered with great clarity of how he'd been treated his whole life by the villagers and shinobis of Konoha. Of how he'd been kicked out of the orphanage and forced to live on the streets till the third Hokage intervened. Of how his education was sabotaged by all of the staff at the academy excluding Iruka. The sheer loathing and hatred that Naruto remembered it all very well. Yes, Tyr had been exceptionally kind and compassionate with him since they first met a year ago, but his sensei didn't know that he possessed a demon inside him. Past experiences made him wary of divulging such information. Information that he himself never shared with anyone except with his fellow Jinchurikis. Would Tyr reject him if he told him the truth about his origins? That was a question that Naruto wasn't eager to find out as he wrestled between telling the truth or not to the man who took him in, fed him properly and bought him clothes when hardly any of the people in his life ever would do such a thing. For all that he's done for me, I owe Tyr the truth. Naruto gulped anxiously. Sensei, there is a lot about me that I think you should know. Tyr felt his eyes soften as he read his student's body language. He could hardly recall a time that he saw his disciple this fretful and worried. He laid a reassuring hand on his student's shoulder. Do not worry, young one. I won't judge you for whatever trouble or worry that plagues you. Tell me what troubles you. Tell him he did as Naruto thoroughly explained the details regarding the night of his birth and the sealing of the Kyuubi to the very moment he met an actual goddess. He glossed over the history of the elemental nation while details like his relationships and the missions he accomplished were not mentioned as he didn't deem them important to divulge. Tyr listened quietly, never once interrupting his student throughout his explanation and soaking in all the details like a sponge. Only after Naruto finished explaining how he arrived at the woods did Tyr finally speak. So, just to see if I understand everything right. You are from another world, a world that houses 9 incredibly powerful demons and the strongest of the 9 is sealed within you. The rest are also sealed within different humans. The world you lived in was a kill or be killed sort of world and was nowhere near as peaceful as Earthland is. There is more to the story, but essentially you and the other 8 individuals got teleported here by the whims of a goddess. Did I get all that right? Naruto laid back down to gaze at the stars, taking a moment to consider how to reply. Yes, I swear I'm not lying to you, sensei. Everything I told you was the truth. And is that the reason why you keep your distance from the people here, Naruto? Because you expect them to treat you as a monster if they ever learned that a demon was sealed inside you? Tyr gently asked. The shinobi instantly turned toward his sensei, shocked beyond words. Yes, but how could you figure that out, sensei? Tyr sighed. It wasn't hard to figure out. The way you were uncomfortable when I first proposed that we come here, how despite living here for 5 months you still cut off any attempts at friendship. Naruto clenched his jaw and said nothing. I understand now why you're apprehensive at forging relations between people, but why tell me this, Naruto? I'm very grateful you did, but what made you decide to do so? That was the only thing that Tyr found himself confused about. I owed you the truth. You took me in, showed me more kindness and compassion than I ever have received in my entire life. I can count on one hand the number of people that welcomed me into their homes, cared about my education and studies, trained me properly, and still have fingers to spare. Tyr felt a bubbling warmth in his chest at his student's word, immensely touched by the way Naruto felt towards him. I see. Silence reigned in as neither knew how to proceed with the conversation. Despite his best efforts, Naruto fidgeted nervously. With the truth out, he felt vulnerable as the prospect of Tyr seeing him in a different light. Even before he disclosed all this information, he still believed that Tyr wouldn't judge him the same way the ignorant shinobi and villagers of Konoha did for being a jinchuriki. Hell, the way Tyr reacted so far had also indicated to him that the towering mountain of a man he came to see as his sensei was not disgusted by him. Yet regardless of all that, a small part of the blonde remained fearful of his master's response to the truth. He just couldn't help feeling such a way. Tyr noticed his students fidgeting and connected the dots immediately. I don't see you as a monster or a demon if that is what worries you. I still see you as my precious apprentice, young one. His words had the intended effect as Naruto relaxed instantly. I see, that is a relief to hear. Tyr mirrored his student and laid on the grass. I'm not going to ask why this. Akira has a profound interest in you. I imagine that whatever deal struck between the two of you is private and personal. All I ask is that you be careful, Naruto. I will, sensei. Still, now that I know that you possess a book detailing how to use God Slayer magic, we are going to have to change your training regimen further. Naruto peered at his teacher inquiringly. Not that I mind training in magic now, but how will you do that, sensei? Teach me, I mean, since you don't possess any magic. And what do you mean by further? Were you planning on changing it even before our discussion? The astoundingly tall man nodded. Indeed, I had another reason to approaching you beyond just simply stargazing alongside you, but to tell you the reason I must first reveal to you more about my life. Hey, seems like it's my turn now. The jinchuriki sat up straight, curiosity lighting his features as despite living together for a year, there was much about his master's past that he was unaware of. I suppose I should start by saying that I was formerly a wizard saint, rank 5 to be more precise. Naruto grew surprised. But that's a rank directly below the 4 gods of Ishgar. I always knew that you were extremely strong, sensei, but you're telling me that the only ones capable of defeating you are those 4? Tyr chuckled. Yes and no, young one. It was recognized by the Magic Council that I was the 5th strongest man in all the continent despite not actually being a wizard, but I believe that even without the council's recognition that they are mages who surpass me. Well, that and the fact that I believe me and Makarov were tied despite my higher ranking. That's really impressive, sensei. Thank you, but there is a reason as to why I'm revealing this. You see, young one, for us wizard saints there are a few but extremely dangerous missions detailed just for us. Some of these jobs would take us far away into the other lands where we can spend months, even years until completion. One mission in particular, after I completed it, I walked away with this. Naruto watched with undivided attention as Tear snapped his fingers. The following few seconds Naruto heard the sound of whooshing in the air before a flying weapon made its way to his teacher's palm, much to his shock. This weapon is called Gelos's Terror. Tear twirled and showcased said weapon to his student. The shinobi got a good look at it. It was a beautifully crafted sword with a slightly arched black steel handle with sharp curved tips on either side of both the hilt and guard. The blade itself was serrated and, like the guard and hilt, was similarly curved with a deadly sharpened end. The blade was colored a menacing twilight, a unique yet startlingly elegant choice that reminded Naruto of the kunai and shurikens back in the elemental nation. Perhaps the weapon's most distinctive feature that separated it from the other swords Naruto witnessed in his life was the second blade that emerged out of the guard. It was shorter in comparison to the first and swept backwards. It was shaded a sleek black with tints of dark crimson that ran along from the tip of the blade to the end of the guard. It was truly an exquisite sword, incredibly fine with an exclusive look to it. If he had to describe it with one word, only the term magnificent came to mind. For those of who want to see rather than read how the sword looks, I'm going to put a link on my profile. The link will be under Origins. The second option to see how the sword looks is to search on Google, Daedric swords. It will be the third or fourth picture. Gelos's Terror, it looks beautiful, Naruto said with no small amount of awe. Tear smiled. Glad you think so. I'm afraid some people don't know beauty even when it hits them in the face. Why is it called Gelos's Terror? It does look terrifying, but who is Gelos? Or is Gelos not a person? To answer your question, I must first tell you about the nation Bellum where I acquired this weapon. The majority of people I met in Bellum had three things in common. They were exceptionally kind people, almost all of them were really good swordsmen, and they all without fail believed that there exists gods to help guide them. Now, even though the population of Bellum believed in various gods, that didn't mean that they loved the gods equally or at all for that matter. Some of the deities had nearly the worship of all the citizens while others not so much. Naruto listened to the tale attentively. Prior to a year ago, the blonde would not have cared about the existence of a higher being. That naturally changed after coming into contact with one, and Naruto couldn't help but be inquisitive about them. The shinobi still remembered vividly of how warm and motherly Akira was towards him. He also recollected with great clarity of how she bristled at the memory of the gods who hurt her. After such a interaction, it was only natural that he'd develop an interest in the stories of the gods. There was one god in particular that was heavily hated upon, Gelos, the god of laughter. Naruto raised his brows in confusion. Gelos was hated upon because he laughed? Yes and no, young one. Seeing his student's perplexed expression, Tear continued. It wasn't that the people of Bellum had a problem with laughter, on the contrary, most of them were quite joyous and carefree. The issue was that Gelos found joy in people's agony and pain. Already I can tell that I dislike him. Tear nodded. Gelos laughed at the men and women in pain, jeering at those dying. He hardly bothered showing himself to the eyes of men, but that didn't mean you couldn't hear his cackling as you drew your last breath. He was among the most despicable of gods that you could ever hear of. One man, a great blacksmith, was in great pain as his mother died due to old age. He heard the amused chortles of Gelos, and so enraged by the act, the blacksmith forged this weapon with the very intention of causing harm and pain to Gelos and putting an end to his sadistic amusement. It's unknown whether this sword accomplished the task it was created for, but what is known is that not long after its creation, the people of Bellum were no longer haunted by the cackles of that mad god. Tear finished his story, now holding the weapon with both hands. Naruto gazed at the sword with even more awe and reverence, clearly intrigued and hooked behind the captivating tale behind its creation. Damn, that is really cool. Tear softly chuckled. It's yours now. He handed the sword to the shocked blonde. But why? It's really cool, don't get me wrong, but what made you decide to give this to me, sensei? Because today marks the day we first met since a year ago. I know you think that you owe me for taking you in, but the truth is, I owe you as well for helping me live again. Before you had come along I was just existing. Thanks to you I'm alive once more, and this is a token of my appreciation and gratitude to you, Naruto. The shinobi stared at his teacher silently before doing something that both he himself and his teacher were unaccustomed to. He hugged his teacher in gratitude. "Thank you, sensei." The abnormally tall man quickly got over his shock and hugged his student back. "You're very welcome and thank you as well, Naruto." Naruto eventually pulled back from the hug to admire his new sword, captivated by it. Despite his best efforts, the shinobi failed to suppress the small smile that crossed his visage. The night was turning out much better than he expected it to be. "Now as for your training regimen, I'm sure we can discuss that tomorrow after a good night's sleep. Come." Tyr stood up, offering a hand to his downed student who took it. "The Elemental Nation. A megacure, they're gone, all of them. I could not find a single trace to where they're located now. It's as though they disappeared right of the map. Forgive me, Lord Pain." Zetsu bowed before the leader of the Akatsuki, feeling skittish and fretful as he could sense the displeasure rolling off the Rinnegan user. Pain ignored the kneeling white creature as he contemplated the news that put a hamper on his plans. It was a little over a year ago that the plan was set into motion to start capturing the jinchuriki and seal the tailed beasts into the Gedo Mazo. Then without any warning or notice, all the 9 jinchuriki were missing and all at the same time. Such a development caused mass alarm in the whole elemental nation as the jinchuriki were part of a precarious and fragile system. The 5 Kage panicked and tension rose sufficiently. The major power were in disarray and were heavily unnerved by the sudden and unexpected development. The only reason war hadn't erupted in the elemental nation was due to the shared knowledge by all the Kage that it wasn't a single jinchuriki who went missing but all of them. Fear lived in the heart of many as countless feared that war was inevitable. Any attempts made by the great nations to find the missing jinchuriki with the greatest trackers came back empty-handed, much to the frustration of the leaders. Pain had held out hope that perhaps Zetsu would return with the whereabouts of the containers, but whatever happened that caused all the jinchuriki to not be found seemed to be even beyond the impressive tracking abilities of the white deformity. Pain sighed. With the numerous attempts made by the Kage, including Kirigakure's new leader Mei Terumi, the Akatsuki weren't able to move around as freely, with the suspicion laid on them for the disappearance of the jinchurikis. "I see, you are dismissed, Zetsu." The generic creature sunk into the ground, leaving Pain to stew in silence. "Are you all right, Nagato?" a voice called out to his left. Pain tossed a glance at the owner of the voice, vision painted with the view of an attractive woman with neck-length pale blue hair garbed in the formal wear of the Akatsuki cloak. "I'm fine, Conan." The only female member of the Akatsuki walked up the Rinnegan user, standing alongside him as he gazed into the cursed rain that afflicted his village for as long as he could remember. "What do we do now?" Conan gently inquired. Nagato didn't reply right away, a fact that the blue-haired beauty got used to long ago, as it meant he was thinking of what to say. "For now, nothing. The search for the missing jinchurikis conducted by the 5 Kage will not allow us to move freely. Right now only we can do is wait." "That's not what I meant. What I mean is that what will we do if we can no longer proceed with our plan, if the jinchuriki are truly gone along with the bijus?" "I don't know, Conan. All that I've done until now was in order to secure peace for the world and prevent meaningless deaths. I just don't know what happens if the tailed beasts are truly gone." "Well, no matter what you decide, just know that I will always support you in whatever decision you make. I will always stand by your side." Conan vowed to him. And she truly meant it. Nothing made her happier than submerging her entire existence into a tool meant to help support her friend achieve his goal. His dream was her happiness. For the first time in years, Nagato smiled softly, feeling a surge of gratitude and love for his childhood friend. "Thank you," he uttered with a softness that surprised the azure-haired woman. Conan quickly got over her surprise and returned Nagato's smile with one of her own. The childhood friends remained together in comfortable silence, watching the rain drop with a peacefulness that did not exist before. "Well, isn't this heartwarming?" Nagato and Conan quickly tensed as the voice of Madara Uchiha made its way to their ears. They both schooled their expression to give away nothing as they turned around to eye the real leader with disinterest. "Madara, your presence here is unexpected." Nagato stepped forward, crossing his arms and appraising the true leader of the Akatsuki with a menacing glare. "There is a lot about me that you wouldn't expect, Nagato, but I have not come to just exchange meaningless dialogue with you." Madara gazed at the Uzumaki coolie. "I've managed to obtain something regarding the whereabouts of the missing jinchurikis." The only factor that indicated Nagato's shock at the news was the brief eyebrow raise before he controlled his facial reaction once more. And what have you found out? With my Sharingan I could see the chakra left by shinobi even long after they left the place. I was in Konoha searching when I've come across the chakra of the Nine Tails jinchuriki heading to the forest. I followed it and much to my surprise, I found the chakra of the other jinchurikis there as well. Despite the years of practiced stoicism, neither Konan or Nagato could suppress the gasp that escaped them at the declaration made. You're saying that all 9 jinchuriki were in one single location? While normally more subdued and tame, Konan couldn't contain her shock as she questioned the masked shinobi. Madara nodded. Indeed, which leads me to believe that their sudden disappearance was planned by them all. Even the 4th Mizukage who was under my control was there. That alone tells me that the jinchurikis are alive and well. Nagato uncrossed his arms as he gazed into the eyehole of the mask shielding Madara's face from view. I see. While this news is surprising but very much welcomed, I fail to see what you want me to do with this piece of information. Zetsu reported to me that members such as Kakuzu, Sasori, and Deidara are contemplating their role in this organization. Without the jinchuriki present they fear that they're wasting their time being part of the Akatsuki. It will take me time until I decipher our precious container's location. Keep them occupied until then. By what means? Madara chuckled darkly. By the means you see fit. Those 3 along with the rest must stay so that they could fulfill their purpose once I find the missing jinchurikis. Pain narrowed his eyes. Very well. The Rinnegan user and the navy-haired Kunoichi watched in silence as the ghost of the Uchiha dematerialized before their very eyes. His form censored by a gravitational swirl that teleported him far away from a megacure. Life for all the 9 jinchurikis had changed much since they arrived in Earthland 4 years ago. Some like Han and Yagura found love with a significant other. Others such as Fu, Yugito and Killer Bee discovered a home within their guild, eventually coming to see their guildmates as their own family. Gaara, instead of joining a guild, founded one instead right in the heart of Harjin town, forever swearing to protect the city and its people that wholeheartedly loved and welcomed him and his siblings as one of their own, becoming the youngest guild master in the history of Fury. Roshi found peace, comfort and friendship in his stay and eventual acceptance into the church that worshipped the ideals set by the water goddess Slayer. But while Roshi chose to live a life reminiscent of a monk, Yukata was the complete opposite with the way he continuously slept with Kyoka and with how he treated the demons around him. Life had indeed changed drastically for all of them, but it could be argued that the one who was exposed to most of that change within the past 48 months was Naruto. Now standing at a respectable height of 5 foot and 11 inches at the age of 16 and blessed with a toned and muscular physique, courtesy of the fruits of his labor. The young shinobi looked even more different in comparison to 3 years ago since he acquired his new weapon. But while his appearance did change dramatically, the biggest change revolved around his fighting abilities. Simply put, through immense hard work, dedication, and discipline, not mentioning through the abuse of his shadow clones, Naruto evolved from the mid-B ranked mage that he was 3 years to a capable low S ranked mage. An extremely impressive transition that wouldn't have been possible had the shinobi not discovered that he gained the memory experienced by his shadow clones. He was quite shocked that day when he learnt that revelation. The shock didn't last long as he decided to put his discovery to good use. Saying that the use of shadow clone in his training helped was putting it lightly. The progress he made in the first month of using the forbidden ninjutsu compared the previous month was massive. It was almost hysterical looking at how much he improved with the use of shadow clones than without. But as Naruto quite unfortunately found out very quickly, though he could utilize the shadow clone technique to help make massive strides of improvement in his taijutsu and kenjutsu, his physical strength and speed was something he had to work on the old-fashioned way. Now he didn't necessarily have a problem with working out his body regularly. Quite the opposite really, he found working out to be a good stress reliever. What was the issue was that the shinobi learned that his clones couldn't help him in his training with anything magic related, much to his dismay and confusion. In the end he and Tyr hypothesized that if the clones were beings made of chakra, then it only made sense that they couldn't access any other energy except the one type of energy responsible for their creation. It was a downer for sure, but that only meant that he had to push himself harder when it came to using his magic. A decision that he was glad he made. Darkness God Slayer magic was extremely powerful and packed quite the punch. Naruto still remembered the tongue lashing he received when one particularly destructive technique wiped out a large margin of the forest. The Magic Council till now were still searching for the one responsible for such destruction. It took quite a few months before Tyr finally agreed that he could train his magic once again without supervision. The young shinobi trained much more carefully since then, but not with less intensity. God Slayer magic was not easy to learn, but Naruto was determined to master it, and to do so he needed only two things: time and discipline. Two qualities he had in abundance. For the past 3 years, he would spend his entire morning by intensely training his body while hundreds of his clones trained under the guidance of Tyr in hand-to-hand combat. Once it struck 12 o'clock, the duo would have a large hearty meal before they'd relax a little to let the food digest. The afternoon and the evening was more or less the same, except for the fact that Naruto trained in his magic while his clones learnt and trained in kenjutsu. It was a routine that he stuck and committed himself too much to Tyr's disapproval. It didn't allow him to be able to interact with the townspeople much, and that was the primary source of the towering man's frustration. The shinobi understood his master's view but didn't necessarily agree with it. Naturally, it led to a large argument between student and teacher. It took quite a while before Tyr conceded and decided to hope that there would be a day where Naruto trusted someone other than him wholeheartedly. By the end of the 3 years, Tyr found himself immensely proud of how far Naruto had come along. With how he progressed, the towering mountain of a man truly believed that given 2 or 3 more years that his student would probably be just a little below where he and Makarov would stand in terms of combat ability. A comforting thought for the abnormally tall man as he gazed at the figure of his student training in the woods with both sadness and regret. It's getting worse. Tyr barely held himself from grimacing as he thought of his illness. Just the other day he had to quickly dismiss himself as they ate dinner so his student wouldn't see the mouthful of blood that he puked in the sink. It was clear to the former wizard saint that his time was nearing, and the only way he could live the rest of his short life peacefully was if he knew that Naruto would have someone wise to guide him. Even now, as he observed Naruto train, Tyr could see the darkness that surrounded and engulfed the young man who he came to view and love as his own son. It had Tyr brim with worry. He couldn't help but curse the sickness that affiliated him since the day he was born, the very same sickness that eventually took away his parents and siblings, the very same one that was trying to take him away from his unofficially adopted son. There were many nights where Tyr found himself restless and unable to sleep due to the worry that plagued him. It took quite some time, but he finally managed to find a solution that would help him relax a little, but whether it would work or not ultimately depended on whether his student accepted or rebelled against his plan. Naruto. Tyr called out loudly, gaining the attention of his student who gazed his way. That's enough for today. The young shinobi stopped his workout and frowned as he walked towards his mentor. Is everything all right, sensei? He asked as he stood before his teacher, confusion lighting his gaze as he silently demanded an answer. I'm fine, young one, but I want you to shower and take it easy for today. We are leaving for Magnolia tomorrow morning. Naruto blinked in surprise. We are? Why? Tyr laid a gentle palm on his student's shoulder. I'll tell you the reason tomorrow when we are on our journey, but for today I want you to relax. The shinobi nodded and headed back towards his home right away, choosing to simply trust his teacher's plans. Time skip. 1 day later. Location. Magnolia. So this is where the wizard Saint Makarov lives? Naruto asked curiously as he walked alongside his master on the bustling streets of Magnolia town. Tyr smiled at the blonde's curiosity. Not much caught his student's attention, so seeing him like this was quite refreshing. Yes, he's lived here for as long as I can remember. He's quite eccentric, but he's among those who I trust most with my life. Naruto quirked an eyebrow in surprise. I see, but you still haven't told me why we have left Shinvania to come here. Tyr exhaled gently. And trust me when I say that I will tell you, but only after I'm done talking to Makarov. He gave his student a stern gaze, demanding him to comply with his stipulation. The shinobi rolled his eyes. Very well, sensei, but let it be said that I'm not annoyed at all, he replied, sarcasm dripping from his tone. The tall man barely suppressed his chuckle. Noted. A few minutes passed before the master and student duo finally stood before the doors of the Fairy Tale Guild. Naruto felt his eyes drift to Tyr, confusion lighting his gaze as he could hear what sounded like shouting and a mass brawl. He opened the door tentatively and ducked as a body flew over his head and out into the streets. Now standing up once more, Naruto looked up and was granted a full view of pandemonium as mages attacked one another, Be it the weird pink-haired fire mage uppercutting a naked ice-wielding mage, or a busty brown-haired woman slamming a large barrel right into the skull of a giant and unnaturally muscular man. Wherever he looked, it just seemed like all the wizards inside had a bone to pick with one another. A chuckle snapped him out of his surprise. Naruto tossed a glance as his amused sensei, watching as his chest rumbled with mirth. It took me by surprise too when I first saw this. It's good to see that despite the many new faces that Fairy Tail hasn't changed. Tyr walked past his student, elegantly dodging and weaving through the hurled attacks and bodies of the tossed mages as he headed to his destination at the bar. The shinobi shook his head, expecting a better first impression from Fairy Tail after all the stories he heard. Deciding to not waste any more time, he headed inside and pointedly ignored the fact that he was walking over the chests of a few mages knocked out cold on the floor. Naruto suddenly stumbled back a step as out of nowhere a body collided into his chest. His eyes darted to the one who slammed into him, dark oceanic blue meeting and locking onto confused chocolate brown orbs. Urza was livid, having just returned recently from a thoroughly exhausting day, one which involved having to meet certain distasteful council members, fight a large pack of powerful Vulcan after she had completed her mission, and be found and chased after by that irritating man Ichiya. One couldn't blame her too much for not being in a stellar mood. She discovered immediately once arriving at the guild that she desperately needed to eat a slice of strawberry cake or else she would go mad after the day she had. So it was with great joy that when her eyes feasted on the sight of a beautiful slice of cake that she plopped down on her seat and felt her exhaustion fade away as she picked up her utensils and got ready to indulge in her desire. If only life was that merciful. The heartbreak that followed when Mirajane decided to torment her rival and throw away the plate serving Urza's favorite delicacy into the face of some unfortunate mage was the last straw. With great rage, the Titania stood up and struck the oldest of the Strauss siblings with a powerful cross that sent her flying right into Macau in Wakaba, starting the very first bar fight of the day much to Makarov's chagrin. The annoyance quickly transitioned in despair as Makarov observed with great fear as the most destructive members got into it. Watching Fu launch and smash Natsu in gray into the nearby wall was what did it, and with a sorrowful cry, Makarov ran upstairs to his office, tears present in his eyes as he was unable to stomach the sight of the Guildhall being destroyed any longer. But naturally it wasn't only Makarov who was displeased by the recent events. Mirajane was not willing to let that punch slide and sent an attack of her own towards an unsuspecting Urza who was fighting other members of her guild. She was sent flying to the other side of the guild. That's how one Urza Scarlet found herself gazing into the startlingly beautiful navy blue eyes of the most handsome man she ever had the pleasure of coming across. Eyes so dark and blue that she felt herself drowning in them. Urza. The thunderous bellowing reached her ears and Urza's eyes quickly towards her source of that scream. Lips set into a grimace as she instantly noticed the flying kick from above that was too close and one that would unfortunately plant itself right on her face. Or so she and Mirajane thought. Acting quickly, Naruto grabbed a hold of the foot half a meter away from the red-headed woman's face, surprising both women with his fast reflexes and with how he didn't buckle under the power behind that kick. Naruto didn't stop there as with a quick turn, threw the scantily clad and aggressive woman right into the wall behind him much to Urza's shock. The shinobi returned his attention to the one who bumped into him, drinking in the features of what was most assuredly one of the hottest women he'd ever seen in his life. From what he could determine by looking at her, she seemed to be his age, which only meant that she would further grow into beauty as she aged. You need to be more aware of your surroundings, he said politely. Urza blushed. Why yeah, thank you for the save. Naruto nodded and walked past her, ignoring the wide-eyed stares coming from the mages around him who couldn't believe what they just witnessed. He didn't make it very far before another body slammed into him. This one he saw coming this time around and allowed it to happen. Tanned feminine arms wrapped around his midsection as joyful orange orbs noted down the features of the one responsible for her living in this new world. Oh my god. It really is you. Fu smiled so wide and happily that her cheeks ached. Naruto gave his fellow jinchuriki a small genuine smile. He may not have been a people's person anymore, but that hardly meant that he would be an ass to what he believed to be his brethren and siblings. It's good to see you too, Fu. Where have you been? What's life like for you? Have you met Gaara-kun or anyone else since then? You need to tell me everything. She grabbed his forearm and quickly dragged the blonde shinobi away from the fighting and towards the corner of the room. Poor Naruto looked back and realized that he lost track of where his teacher went during the ordeal. Tyr looked around nostalgically at the place, discovering that despite the many years since he last stepped foot in this place that it hardly changed. He stood before the door of his friend's office, barely suppressing a chuckle as he could hear the snot blowing and the waterworks made by his old friend. Composing himself, he knocked on the door and bit his lips to prevent his snickers from being heard due to Makarov's broken tone. "What do you want now? Have you all not tormented me enough?" Tyr smiled. "I have to say, old friend, you really do know how to give a warm and kind welcome." The towering man didn't have to wait long before he heard the sound of pitter-patter of feet hitting the floor. Within seconds the door to Makarov's office was opened and there stood before him the current rank 5 wizard saint. Through the use of his titan magic, Makarov grew a couple of feet till he stood eye to eye with the former wizard saint. He tossed a smile at his old friend and embraced him. Tyr laughed gently before he returned the embrace. The two men said nothing for a few seconds before Makarov pulled back and smiled at the heavily bearded man. "Do forgive me for that, Tyr. I'm afraid you know how it is here with these lovable nuisances." Tyr's eyes twinkled as he wrapped an arm around his friend's shoulder. "Nothing to apologize for. If anything, I found the exchange to be quite humorous." Makarov grinned. "So what brings you here, old friend? Not that I mind having you here, of course." "I appreciate the kind words, Makarov. As for why I am here, I'm hoping we can talk about this in a more private setting." The normally short wizard saint nodded understandingly. "Of course, let's talk inside my office. I can activate the sound silencing magic inside." Returning back to his actual height, the short and tall duo entered the office. Tyr closed the door while Makarov walked around his desk and jumped into his custom-made seat. The giant of a man pulled the nearest chair and sat before the master of fairy tale. "So before we converse and catch up and generally have a pleasurable time, let's first get down to business." Makarov crossed his hands together and gazed at the other occupant of the room. Tyr smiled. "One of the many traits I admire about you. It's always about getting the business done so we can relax and enjoy ourselves afterwards. To put it simply, I want you to care and look after my apprentice." Makarov blinked in surprise. "You took on an apprentice? That is quite surprising to hear." "I hadn't planned for it that day. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision, but one that I do not regret at all." The third master of fairy tales smiled softly at his friend. "I would definitely like to hear the story of how you met the boy, but right now I would like to know why you want me to look after him. I do not mind caring for him, but I am confused as to why you wish to leave him in my care." Tyr grimaced. "You remember my sickness, right?" "I do. It was because of that sickness that you left the rank of the wizard saints and decided to live in isolation, wanting to live the rest of your life at peace rather than fighting dark wizards or completing council missions. It's gotten worse. Back then I could go for almost half a year without coughing blood, but now I'm lucky if I don't cough blood once a week. It happened just yesterday. I don't know how long I got." Makarov frowned. "I'm sorry to hear that, Tyr." Tyr shook his head gently. "Nothing for you to apologize for, old friend. I would like to request that you look after him. Naruto is his name. He's a capable young mage, strong and intelligent, and at heart he's very kind, but..." The fairy tale master listened attentively. "But despite being incredibly kind, he's been through a lot of pain. Pain that causes him to distance himself from others and makes it incredibly hard for him to trust anyone except for me. I fear that he will be truly alone when I no longer walk in Earthland." Makarov contemplated the information he'd been given, his eyes softening as he thought of the young wizard who seemed to have went through a lot. It seems that no matter who comes to fairy tale, they all have experienced something painful. Tyr exhaled softly. "Makarov, I know that I have no right to ask this of you, but please look after him. Naruto is a really good kid, he's th." Makarov raised a palm. "There is no need to say any more than you already have, my friend. Of course I'll look out for the kid." Makarov grinned. "Hell, you should already know that I would have done it even if you didn't say anything." Tyr smiled gratefully, feeling much more relieved with the verbal confirmation even when he knew that Makarov would most likely agree with his request. "Thank you, my friend." "Of course." The shortest wizard saint nodded. "Though I do have a few other questions that I would like to have answered if it's not an issue with you." "I have no issues at all." "Excellent. So here are some of the questions that come to mind. When do you want Naruto to join Fairy Tail? Is it too much to hope that you will join as well? Rank-wise, where would you place Naruto? I'm talking ranks by our standards." Tear stroked his beard. I am thinking of having Naruto join as soon as possible. We only have to go back to home to get some of our stuff, and yes, I will join Fairy Tail as well. A large smile graced Makarov's visage. About damn time if you ask me. Tear chuckled but nodded. As for his rank, I would place him at about low S-class rank. Makarov's eyebrows raised up in surprise. That is rather impressive for one so young. Speaking of, how old is he? 16. He's low S rank at 16 years old, Makarov asked, immensely shocked by the revelation. Tear nodded. Indeed, but even that is not the most shocking news. He has this technique that allows him to learn at an extremely fast rate. That's how he went from a mid-B rank to low S class in only 3 years. That's very impressive, Makarov murmured with awe. The former wizard saint continued to stroke his beard. If he stays consistent, and I know he plans to, Naruto will most definitely surpass us within the next few upcoming years. I take it that the technique you spoke of can be used only by him? Indeed, only he possesses the ability to use it. Makarov closed his eyes briefly. Probably for the best. One can only imagine the sheer destruction that would follow if such a useful ability fell into the wrong hands. That would be another reason as to why I wish for you to care for him. At his friend's slightly confused expression, Tear elaborated. Naruto, as I mentioned before, is a really good kid, but there's a darkness in him that runs deep. How deep I do not know, but what I do know is that without care and guidance, he can easily be swallowed by that darkness within him. And become a terrifying and powerful dark mage on par with wizard saints. Makarov finished gravely. Tear frowned yet did not deny his friend's statement. There is no one but you who I trust to look after him. Makarov looked at the tall giant firmly. I won't let you down, old friend. Tear smiled. I know you won't. Now that we have finished discussing business, I do believe that there is much to discuss and talk about. The fairy tale master chuckled and got up from his chair. Come, let's get comfortable at the couches. I already know that we will be inside for quite some time. Gaara-kun. Naruto questioned curiously as they sat at the table in the furthest corner in the guild, offering them some sort of privacy from the inquisitive eyes of the mages around them. Not that he expected them to try, considering the mass brawl going on. Fu blushed crimson. I mean, look, that's not important. It's not like I have a CC crush on him or something. She stuttered, inwardly cringing at how bad her lie was. The blonde shinobi rolled his eyes. I won't tell him that you like him, even though it's clear you do, if it helps you relax. Fu squeaked. So how have you been, Fu? It's been a long time since we first met. The fairy tale wizard smiled broadly. I know. There's so much to tell you, I don't even know where to start. Naruto chuckled slightly. How about with this place, fairy tale? Well, Fu rubbed the back of her head sheepishly. Despite the bar fight going on right now, you have to believe me when I say that fairy tale is like one giant family. We fight and argue all the time, don't get me wrong, but we also laugh and smile together more often than not. Let me tell you what it's like here. The blonde shinobi quirked an eyebrow but listened patiently. Our very best drinker and one of my best friends is Kana Alberona. That woman, despite only being 16, can drink barrels of alcohol and not get drunk. That doesn't sound very healthy, Naruto said sarcastically. Fu rolled her eyes. What's not healthy is watching one of my friends strip regularly. Gray Fullbuster is the name. The silly guy developed a bad habit of stripping without even realizing it, and let me say that I've seen enough of his balls for a lifetime. The shinobi looked at her incredulously, not believing for a moment that there existed someone that shameless. I wish I was lying, but I'm not, sadly. She shook her head, sighing tiredly. Moving on, we have Natsu Dragneel, Gray's rival and one of the main contributors to Fairy Tail's reputation for destroying public property. Now would be a good time to mention that he was raised by a dragon. Naruto crossed his arms. I'm guessing that the next few characters I'll be hearing about are even more eccentric than the ones already mentioned? Fu grinned. You guessed right. There's the Strauss siblings, who each have their own unique personality. Lisana, who's the youngest, acts the most mature of them all. Elfman is all about being a man. And then you have Mirajane. Fu scowled. That woman is absolutely demonic for no reason at all. Speaking of that dreadfully annoying woman. She grasped his shoulders excitedly. Good job tossing her the way you did. Naruto blinked. That was Mirajane? The fairy tale wizard nodded excitedly. Yup, and you just tossed her away like a fly. Pretty cool way to make an entrance, by the way. The blonde shinobi shrugged his shoulders casually. It was instinctive. There was this redhead who bumped into me and she didn't notice the kick coming her way. I only did what I did to protect her. Fu squealed delightedly. I know. I saw the entire thing, and that redhead, if you're wondering, is Urza Scarlet, known to the magic world as Titania, and one of my other best friends, if you're wondering. I thought it was so sweet how you protected her the way you did. Naruto rolled his eyes. Don't get any ideas in your head. She may be beautiful, but my mind is not fixated on relationships right now. She giggled. Don't worry, if it helps you relax, I won't tell her that you think she's beautiful, Fu teased. Naruto grunted. Whatever. Coming back on topic, it seems that you really love this place and the people here, and from the way you've described it, seems like the people here love you as well. Fu nodded. Fairy Tale is my home, and everyone here, Mirajane included, I consider to be my family. Everything and everyone I have in my life, all the happiness and love that I've found, I owe it all to you, Naruto. Thank you, she said softly, grasping his hand with her smaller ones and giving it a tender squeeze. Naruto looked to the side. There's no need to thank me, us jinchuriki have to help and support one another. She smiled in agreement and let go of his hand after another grateful squeeze. So what about you? What's life been like for you since coming here? The blonde took a few seconds to contemplate how to best answer her question. Peaceful. Very peaceful. Definitely an improvement over how things were back in Konoha. I don't know when it happened, but all I do know is that I'm definitely relieved to be here. Fu bobbed her head in agreement, a happy and content smile plastered on her visage. I know what you mean, it feels like a dream, the very kind that you never want to wake up from. Naruto closed his eyes in thought. That sounds just about right, makes me extremely glad that it's real, that this is real. The female jinchuriki censored her head in curiosity. What about the others? Did you get to see or hear about them again since we arrived here? The blonde shook his head. No, but it seems to me like you have been in contact with Gaara. How's everything with him? Did you get to talk or see anyone else? Fu felt the heat creep up to her visage once more as she twiddled her thumbs slightly. I have talked with Gaara-kun quite a few times. The first time he came over was around a year ago when he wanted to talk to Gramps on how to create and successfully manage a guild. Naruto blinked in surprise. Huh. That is surprising to hear. So Gaara has his own guild now? Yup. He even became a part of one of the 10 wizard saints in the past few months. The shinobi took a few seconds to absorb the information thrown at him. Good for you, Gaara. And I take it that Gramps happens to be Makarov Drayar? Fu giggled. You got that right. Everyone here just calls him Gramps or Master, but back on topic. Gaara has come over quite a few times. As for the rest, I haven't seen any of them except for old man Roshi. I have heard news of some of them though. Remember Killer Bee? At Naruto's nod she continued. Well, he too has become a part of the 10 wizard saints, though it happened for him around 2 years ago. Next thing you know, we all there you are, you bastard. Mirajane thundered as she stomped her way towards the Jinchuriki duo. I could give 2 shits about you being cute, you don't throw me to a wall and just casually walk away. The guild hall quieted down immediately, rivals and enemies pausing from their fights so they could gaze at the scene with interest and heavy intrigue. Naruto stood up, Fu standing alongside him as she glared menacingly at her sometimes friend and more often than not rival. Leave him alone, Mirajane, he and I are too busy catching up to deal with you. Mira scoffed before she smirked sadistically. Please, like you know how to handle a man. I mean, if you did, that man Gaara would be here right now with you instead of in a different city.
Fu saw red. What did you say, you bitch? The blonde internally sighed miserably as he pondered over what he did to deserve this.
Calm down, Fu. Mirajane is just all talk but no action, Urza said as she walked and stood alongside one of her closest friends. Mira laughed. That's funny coming from you of all people. Urza felt a vein bulge on her forehead as she glared at her rival. And what is that supposed to mean? The part-time waitress smiled cruelly. Exactly what it means. You're pretty much in the same boat as Fu when it comes to seducing a man, Urza. Hey blondie. Mira called out while fluttering her eyelashes coyly at him. I may be a little angry at you, but I am willing to forgive you if you show me a good time. She bit her lips seductively, pulling down her top slightly to reveal more of her milky expansive cleavage to her target audience. Naruto didn't get the chance to reply as Urza beat him to it. Cover up yourself, you old harlot. No one wants to see your saggy censored. She viciously assaulted, less than amused with her rival's shameless state. I believe that he can speak for himself. Give him a chance to reply, tin can. Or are you jealous at the idea of me censoring the daylights out of that cutie? Mirajane replied, a saucy smirk on her visage. Like he'd want to be intimate with a 70-year-old grandmother. Titania clapped back. The oldest of the Strauss siblings frowned before a pleasant idea entered her head. Walking up to the silent and stoic shinobi, Mira surprised everyone when she cupped Naruto's face and gave the surprised shinobi a deep kiss. Silence. Pure silence encompassed the Fairy Tail Guild, a guild notorious for their rowdiness and eccentric characteristics that more often than not led into the destruction of public or private property. They were a very strange bunch, hardly anything could faze them, and for a good reason too. With the abnormalities that they witnessed or in most cases, performed, it was only natural that it would take something really phenomenal in order to catch them by surprise. Really, if someone or something could surprise them, it only stood to reason that whatever surprised them was even stranger than they were. Such a thought process made sense if one were to really think about it. And in the end their hypothesis proved to be correct, because even stranger than having Grey strip naked, or having Elfman preach the word man, or even Kana drinking barrels of alcohol every day, was having Mirajane, the demon and arguably the scariest member of the guild, kissing the very life out of some blonde stranger. The very same one who caught her kick aimed at Urza, then hurled her away to the nearest wall. Everyone gazed at the scene with complete and utter shock, the sound of smooching being loud and audible to the ear of the transfixed members of Fairy Tail as Mirajane pressed her lips hungrily against Naruto's, playfully nibbling against his lower lip and moaning in satisfaction from the experience. Of everyone inside the guild, Naruto was the one most caught off guard by the bold move, his mind still not having comprehended that someone had just waltzed up to him and stole his first kiss. But while the shinobi was currently dumbfounded, Mira contented herself with giving the shinobi a searing and deep kiss that he would never ever forget in his entire life. Unfortunately, all good things had to come to an end eventually. Having had her fill, Mira censored it on his lips and pulled back, smiling coyly as her eyes caught sight of quite a few men awkwardly shuffling the tents in their pants from the sound of that pop ringing in the air. She let go of Naruto's cheeks, taking a step back and turning around to face her red-headed rival, a large smirk plastered on her face. I hope you took notes, Tin Can, because that's how you kiss someone, but if you need additional lessons, I suppose I wouldn't mind too much to kiss the cutie again. Urza snapped out of her shock and glared murderously at the ivory-haired women, hints of jealousy present in her brown-tinted orbs. I don't need lessons on how to kiss, bitch, and keep your dirty mouth away from him. He doesn't want or need the taste of shit on him. Rage gripped the eldest of the Strauss siblings as she took a step forward towards the re-equipped mage. What was that, you red-headed cow? You heard me, she replied before smirking smugly. Or did I hit too close to home? Mira let instincts guide her as she threw a ferocious kick that launched the surprised redhead towards the other side of the guild, starting yet again another bar fight. She smiled victoriously before she jumped into the fray. Fu looked over wide-eyed at her fellow Jinchuriki, gripping his arms and tugging it relentlessly. You just kissed Mirajane. That snapped him out of his shock. Naruto narrowed his eyes and scoffed. No, I didn't, she kissed me, there's a difference. And let me guess, you didn't enjoy her kissing you? Fu asked sarcastically. Quite frankly, I was too surprised to feel anything else. He shrugged his shoulders casually. Well, if you ask me, you should keep your distance from that one, she's crazy and insane. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the mint hair-colored girl. I don't know how to feel about you making judgments on women on my behalf. You have nothing to worry about, brother. She gave him a thumbs up. Brother? He repeated confusedly. Fu smiled, if a bit shyly. Of course, everything good in my life I owe it all to you, and with how you said, and I quote, us Jinchuriki have to help and support one another. Well, with everything you have done or said for me, it's only natural that I think of you as family. Silence greeted her ears for the next few seconds afterwards, and Fu couldn't help the apprehension that crawled to the pits of her stomach, worried that she overstepped on some personal boundary. Her worries melted away as Naruto smiled kindly. I'm honored that you feel that way about me, sister. Fu couldn't help but squeal happily before she jumped and hugged the blonde excitedly. Despite his normally stoic exterior, Naruto couldn't help but chuckle before he ended up hugging the shorter women. He normally wasn't very emotional. No, that wasn't the word. He normally wasn't as carefree and relaxed with people as he was right now, but he did have a soft spot for his fellow jinchuriki who have suffered just as much as he had. Knowing that Fu experienced the same pain that he had experienced, it was what allowed him to connect with her so easily. Fu pulled back and smiled brightly at the blonde. Now that we're siblings, I want it to be made perfectly clear that I only approve of you being in a relationship with Urza and no one else. A deadpanned look was her response. I'm not looking for a relationship, and even if I was, I do not know her well enough to decide if I want to try my chances with her. She giggled. That will change, you'll see. Naruto replied back sarcastically. Out of the corner of his eyes, he spotted his master standing on the balcony of the second floor with some tiny elderly man who he presumed to be Makarov. And now he's not exactly tiny. Watching the vertically challenged elderly suddenly morph into a large hulking beast of a man almost had him whistling in amazement. Reminded him of Choji back in Konoha. Enough fighting. Makarov thundered, startling all the mages present and freezing them in place. He glared menacingly at them, practically daring anyone to continue destroying the guild, his gaze shifting from one mage to another and smoke billowing from his nose as he crossed his arms. Can't you fools behave when we have guests? For the love of God, please be civilized when we have company, that is all I ask. Most of them looked down sheepishly while others just glared at their fellow wizards, wanting nothing more than to keep fighting. Macau, perhaps the wisest mage of the bunch, rubbed the back of his head embarrassedly. We're dearly sorry for embarrassing you, master. Makarov sighed before he reverted back to his normal form. He jumped at the wooden railings of the balcony, gaze dropping down below in order to eye the rowdy and eccentric bunch, his rowdy and eccentric bunch. It's all right, just try not to destroy the guild hall too much, we need it in order to party and celebrate today. That statement garnered confused looks from everyone. Makarov chuckled before he threw a hand towards the towering giant behind him. We're celebrating the return of an old friend of mine, Tyr, the god of war. The younger generation, including Naruto, looked on confusedly while the entire older generation were shocked out of their mind. That's him. Macau shakily questioned. Tyr stepped forward, raising a hand in greeting. It's a pleasure to meet you all. Saying that his appearance stunned the entirety of the older generation was putting it lightly. Hardly any of them could think coherently as they gazed at the legend with wide eyes. Everyone younger just looked at their older counterparts with puzzled expressions. Kana nudged Wakaba on the side, trying to get his attention. When that didn't work, she resorted to stomping on his toes and barely repressed the urge to laugh as Wakaba bit his lips in order to stifle the yell of pain that almost came out. He glared at the bikini-clad brunette. What? He harshly whispered. Who is this man? She quietly asked. That's Tyr Odinson, the former rank number 5 wizard saint before he retired in the most dangerous hand-to-hand combatant the world has ever seen. Kana's eyes widened. Whoa. Woe is putting it nicely. One of the reasons he was so well known was because he was the only wizard to ever make it to the wizard saints ranking despite not having any magic. What's even more impressive is that he's as powerful as our master even though he doesn't possess any magical abilities. Wakaba quietly proclaimed. Kana did not know what to say, she was absolutely speechless at the reveal. Makarov couldn't help but grin at their reaction. We also have to celebrate him and his apprentice joining our family. He pumped a fist to the air. Such a statement snapped the older mages out of their shock and elicited cheers out of everyone, always excited to always have more members in the guild. Everyone was happy with the news. Everyone but Naruto, that is. Irritation and bits of disapproval lingered in his gaze as he locked orbs with his teacher. Makarov's office. It's nice to meet you, Naruto. The pleasure is all mine, Mr. Makarov. Naruto replied to the tiny guild master respectfully.
Makarov chuckled good-heartedly at the confused blonde. If only my brats were half as respectful or as well-mannered as you were, he sighed dramatically as he thought of his trouble-seeking children. I wouldn't be developing gray hair as fast as I am now.
Sorry to break it to you, old friend, but all your hair is gray. Tyr cheerfully interjected, a hint of laughter audible in his tone. Yes, I am well aware of that fact, thank you. Makarov sent a deadpanned look at the towering giant making himself at home on his couch. Is it wrong for me to fantasize for one moment that I'm still in my 40s? He questioned annoyedly. Of course not. Feel free to believe whatever you like, I won't judge. Tear stated, an amused grin plastered on his normally stoic visage. How kind of you. He replied sarcastically before he returned his attention back to the currently seated blonde on the other side of his desk. And please Naruto-kun, there is no need to be so formal with me. Most around here just call me Gramps, old man, or in rare cases Master. Master is what I would be calling you if I were a part of your guild, which speaking of, Naruto whirled his attention to his teacher. Why are we joining a guild, sensei? You know that I don't like being around people. Tear sipped from his cup of tea before gently placing it down on the table. Naruto, I'm not going to sugarcoat or mince things, he said before sighing, heart clenching painfully at the news he was about to deliver to his pseudo-son. I'm dying. What? Naruto immediately questioned, standing up and eyes narrowing on the seated giant. Sorry for saying this, sensei, but your sense of humor censored. Though his words conveyed him not taking his teacher's words seriously, the tension that was now present in the blonde's posture foretold an entirely different story. Makarov closed his eyes in sadness, feeling grief for both his friend's situation and for the young man who clearly cared much for him. The former wizard saint stood up, eyes softening as he walked over to his precious student, laying a gentle hand on the younger man's shoulder. Unfortunately, fate is not that merciful with me. Naruto inhaled and exhaled slowly, dread and a sense of panic beginning to grow at the pits of his stomach. I want to know everything, he demanded. Tear nodded. There isn't much to say really. I was born with a disease, the very same one that afflicted my father and his father before him. It's hereditary in my lineage and it was something I just had to learn how to live with. It's known as infantatus. There isn't much that is known about this disease of mine. It's incredibly, almost astonishingly rare to have. So rare that there is hardly much research that has been done on it. All that is known about infantatus is that the symptoms include coughing blood, nausea, extreme fatigue, loss of magical abilities at a young age, and declining health among other varying symptoms, he added. Naruto clenched his fist frustratedly, his mood worsening by the second as he listened attentively to his sensei and father figure. I was young when my father sat me at his knee and told me this. Fast forward to a couple of years later and he, Tear clenched his eyes shut, finding himself unable to finish his sentence. He opened his eyes and gazed sadly at his student. There is no cure for this disease. I learnt that the hard way. It's honestly a miracle that I survived this long, living to 72 years of age when infantatus usually kills its victims between the age of mid-30s to early 50s. Naruto blinked. You're 72? But you look like you're 45 or something. The people of Hoya are blessed with longevity. We can live up to 150 years of age rather than the standard 100. It's also because of my longevity that I look like I'm in my 40s rather than 70s. He supplied evenly. I see, Naruto quietly replied. Tear comfortingly squeezed his student's shoulder before he dropped his hand. My time is nearing, Naruto. When will my heart give out on me I do not know, but I can be at peace if I know that you're gonna be with Fairy Tail under Makarov's care. The shinobi gritted his teeth angrily. Well, I won't be at peace. What we need to do is search for really competent doctors so they see. Damn it, boy. Do you not understand that I can quite literally die the next day? Tear interrupted him furiously. Makarov watched on despondently, wanting nothing more than for his friend to be wrong but knowing deep down that he was right in his beliefs. And do you not understand that I want to help you find a doctor who can create a cure for you rather than to be making friends? Naruto replied back just as furiously. Tear sighed. I barely have any time left. What time I do have should be devoted on making sure you're living a happy life. That is what I want. And what I want is for you to focus on finding someone who can create a cure. Seilah, listen. Tear roared, silencing his normally impassive and calm student. I wish things were different. Trust me, I do. But there is no changing the fact that I will die. Despite the anger he felt towards his rebellious student, Tear easily reined it in knowing that his student only wanted him alive and in good health. He couldn't fault him for that. Naruto, he called out softly, said Shinobi crossed his arms and looked away. Like any other person, I too have regrets. Naruto said nothing, only turning his head to meet Tear's melancholic gaze. Among them, my biggest regret was choosing to live a life of isolation for 20 years and before that, throwing myself to finish one council mission after another for also 20 years and depriving myself from truly living. I remember the pain I felt when I lost my father, and with me possessing the same sickness he did, I chose to alienate myself from the world. It was something I had done ever since he died. The only reason I even have Makarov as a friend, Tyr said while gesturing towards the current wizard saint, was because he stubbornly tried to be my friend for 2 whole years despite my blatant refusal back then. Eventually I had decided that there could be no harm from having only one friend, and it was one of the best decisions I had ever made. Makarov smiled nostalgically. We had quite a lot of good times afterwards. Tyr chuckled and sent his friend a warm smile. That we did. The former wizard saint then turned towards his apprentice. I lost out on the chance to experience and learn so much about truly living life because I was constantly afraid, and the thing is, I would have continued living my life like that had you not arrived on my doorsteps that day. He added, smiling kindly towards his silent student. You coming into my life was the best thing that ever happened to me, and I do not lie or exaggerate when I say that I see you as my son. I live once more because of you, Naruto. Tyr genuinely stated, meaning every word of what he said. No matter how much he tried to remain angry at his teacher, Naruto couldn't help the warm feeling that crept up to his chest at his father figure's words. He sighed in mock annoyance. You're really annoying, Dad. Makarov managed to suppress his snickers, not wanting to ruin the moment between the two. Tyr on the other hand had no reservations and laughed warmly. Well, I would be doing something wrong if my teenage son is constantly happy with me. The shinobi rolled his eyes. It took but a couple of moments before Tyr managed to rein himself in, mirth fading away from his eyes as he gazed at his apprentice. But coming back to the matter at hand, I'm telling you all this because I want you to not make the same mistakes I did and withdraw from others. From what you have told me, you have a good reason for why you wish to stay away from others, and I have no doubt that there is more to your past than what you have told me, but Naruto, you can't let the past hold you back from realizing the full potential of life. Memories of how a person he once regarded as his best friend, of how Sasuke tossed away the bond they shared then proceeded to stab his hand into the blonde's chest flashed into Naruto's mind. That was one scar that was never going to fade away. It's not easy, sensei. Tyr laid a comforting hand on the shinobi's shoulder. I know it isn't, and I won't lie to you when I say that there will be many people who will try to take advantage of you when you choose to open your heart to them. But there are also people, good people, who would do everything in their power to protect you. Those are people who one would call comrades, friends, family. Naruto pursed his lips, still unsure. He gazed at his sensei's eyes and sighed once he noticed his hopeful gaze. All right, if you're really insistent, then I suppose I can join and try make a few friends around here. Tyr smiled. But we still have to find you a capable doctor. The former wizard saint nodded. Very well, we shall head out tomorrow. Actually, Makarov interjected while gaining their attention. My friend Porlyuzuka is a very capable doctor with decades of experience. She might be able to do something. Tyr nodded. Is that the woman you were telling me about 2 decades ago? The one who was in your guild and is blessed with extraordinary medical talent? The very same one. Naruto blinked before his eyes narrowed dangerously at his teacher. It's obvious that you haven't went to her back then. Why? Tyr shrugged his shoulders. After around 100 visits to hospitals and professional doctors all around Fury and even outside of it, one tends to lose faith in doctors. That's of course not mentioning that I stopped caring about whether I would live or die. Then it's a good thing that you started to care now. We'll have you visit Porlyuzuka tomorrow, and with any luck she'll be able to make you a cure. Makarov said. Let's hope for the best. In the meantime, Makarov walked over to the pair, pulling out a stamp from somewhere. Let's make you both official members. We'll start with you, Tyr. Where do you want your guild mark and what color? In red, and where my heart is, please. The towering giant answered. 10 seconds later and Tyr found himself admiring the insignia on his left proctorial muscle. And what about you, Naruto? Makarov asked the young blonde. We'll go with black and on the side of my right shoulder. Another 10 seconds later and where was once a clear and spotless shoulder now proudly carried the emblem of fairy tale. Naruto inspected it curiously before grunting. Makarov grinned cheerfully. Now I believe that everyone outside wishes to welcome and talk to you both. Let's not disappoint them. How exciting. Naruto said sarcastically. His reaction drew a laugh out of the wizard saints, both current and former. Naruto inwardly sighed as the curious eyes of the mages bombarded him. A large part of him was heavily tempted to glare at Fu for dragging him to the large circular table where most of her friends were. Seated to his left was the mint-haired devil herself, who grinned cheekily at him, no doubt somehow being able to sense his discomfort. At Fu's left was the blushing redhead he saved from earlier. Why was she blushing when his eyes fell on her? He had no idea. his gaze then drifted to the bra-clad brunette on the other side of Redhead. After that was a petite blue-haired girl, her two obviously madly in love sidekicks, some guy who oddly enough started to strip. Then came what was undoubtedly the three siblings Fu had told him about, composing of the abnormally bulky man, the women who boldly stole his first kiss, and the youngest girl of the three who, as Fu put it, seemed to be the most mature of the three. "You smell funny." Natsu scrunched his nose, looking at the whiskered man weirdly. Naruto barely suppressed the urge to sigh, and how could he forget about the strange pink-haired boy who started sniffing at him? "Natsu. That is no way to address someone." Seilah scolded before turning towards the seated blonde. "I'm so sorry about that, my husband can be a bit too direct sometimes." Naruto nodded while internally wondering if she was actually serious about being married. Meh, it was none of his concern. "But he does smell very funny, Idon Natsu." Urza slammed her fist on the table, sending a frightening glare towards the pink-haired boy. "That's enough." "Why yes ma'am," he squeaked. Urza shook her head disapprovingly before she chose to focus on their newest member. "Please ignore him, I'll make sure to discipline him on proper manners later." She vowed, much to the Dragon Slayer's horror. "My name is Urza, Urza Scarlet. And I'm Kana Alberona." The brunette introduced herself. From there one by one they introduced themselves before they gazed curiously at the blonde. He grunted. "Naruto Uzumaki." Seilah smiled kindly. "Welcome to Fairy Tale Naruto." "Thank you. If you don't mind me asking." She leaned forward, head tilting in intrigue. "Where did you come from? Your name sounds pretty unique and foreign." "Outside of Ish he's just like me," Fu interrupted cheerfully. That had everyone look at the shinobi with odd looks while Naruto looked disbelievingly at his fellow jinchuriki. "You're not from this world as well?" Levi asked excitedly, animated stars found in her gaze. "No, I'm not," he answered while glaring at the embarrassed-looking Fu. Urza gazed concernedly at her newfound crush. "So, that would make you just like Fu, a jinchuriki." Naruto tossed his gaze towards the redhead, alternating his attention with her and his fellow shinobi. "Seems to me like Fu told you guys everything." "In my defense." Fu rubbed the back of her head sheepishly. "I couldn't stop feeling guilty from keeping Hu and what I was a secret after living here with them for 2 years, so I told them about how I was a jinchuriki and how I was not from their world and that there were 8 more like me." Kana snorted. "I still find it stupid that people actually judged you for being a jinchuriki was the word? Anyway, don't they understand that a glass filled with water is still a glass? Those people must be really dumb." "You got that right. I mean even Natsu knew that Fu was Fu and not the demon sealed within her." Gray added, wholeheartedly agreeing with the card wizard. Fire exploded out of the Dragon Slayer as he snarled at his rival. "Who are you calling dumb, you stupid ice princess? Who else do you think, you charcoal for brain?" Urza once again slammed her fist on the table, glaring dangerously at the now 2 cowering boys. "Behave you two." She waited for a few more moments before she turned her head to the blonde. "Fu pretty much told us everything except for how you all arrived in our world. As I told you all how many times, it's not my story to share on how we arrived here," Fu said annoyedly. Naruto grunted. "Who else knows? Everyone in this table and Maka Gigi." "I see." Though his stoic visage and tone might have said otherwise, truth was Naruto found Fu's friends to be very admirable. There was not a single sign of judgment coming from them about how he and Fu contained beings capable of causing mass destruction, and considering Fu regarded them as her family. That simply told him of how there was nothing but love and trust between them all. He could see why she considered them her family. "How do you find it here in Earthland, Naruto?" Levi asked. Naruto tilted his head. "Certainly a lot better than the elemental nation." "Were there dragons in your world?" "I'm very sure you guys can guess who asked that." "No, there wasn't, don't know if they ever existed," he answered. Kana hummed. "Why is your sensei called the god of war?" That question caught everyone's curiosity as they stared at the shinobi. Naruto shrugged his shoulders. "I don't know, but I plan on finding out." "Were the men in your world pretty manly?" Naruto sighed as he gazed at the bulky man across from him. Why wasn't he too surprised by the man's question? He shrugged his shoulders. "I guess, I have no idea." "How strong are you, Blondie?" Mira questioned, hints of curiosity present in her tone. It wasn't every day that someone easily hurled her away, and she was an S-rank wizard, even if it was just recently. HMPHED. Stronger than you. Oh. Nearly everyone cowered in fright as Mira smiled sweetly, too sweetly. Then perhaps you and I should have a go. Naruto waved his hand in disinterest. Maybe some other time, now if you all will excuse me. He stood up and just as he was about to walk away, Mira smirked teasingly. If you ever want someone to practice kissing with, I'm always available, she declared while stunning everyone at the table. He grunted and walked away. Tartarus the Aetherius, that was the name of the race of demons created from the Book of Zareth. Demons that came in all manners of shapes and forms. One such example would be of how a few of them could be found to rival and even surpass the heights of mountains while most others were of the average human height. Another example would be of how one demon possessed talons and claws while another possessed seemingly no flesh or muscle at all, being composed of only bones. Needless to say, there were all sorts of peculiarities and differences that existed within the Aetherius race. But if there was one characteristic in particular that they all undoubtedly shared, then it was that their physical appearance when gazed upon by a human, only invoked terror in said human's heart. That characteristic rang true for all the Aetherius demons, rather natural considering most of them did look like they descended from hell. Most being the key term. Seilah was a demon unique even among the Aetherius. If not for the horns protruding from either side of her head, one would think that she was human, albeit a very gorgeous human, but a human nonetheless. Combine that with her love for books, her apparent dislike of spilling blood, and her cold persona aimed at all her fellow demons, and it all culminated into her being scorned by her race. Though one couldn't judge her for being cold to her fellow demons when they held her in contempt for resembling a human, and if she wasn't being given dirty looks for something she couldn't control, then it was lustful looks due to her otherworldly beauty. And due to her horns, she couldn't exactly leave Tartarus and hide amongst the humans. A demon she may be, but Seilah, like any other being in existence, also possessed feelings that were trampled upon for as long as she could remember. Until recently. To think the first act of kindness ever shown to her would come from a 16-year-old human boy, it wasn't what she had in mind. Try as she might, Seilah could not stop thinking about the handsome teenager who spared her then proceeded to heal her right afterward. He was an interesting human, one who, unlike the vast majority of his species, did not fear or hate her for simply being a demon, and choosing instead to show her mercy when hardly any would have. Seilah highly doubted she would see him anytime soon, but fortunately she had managed to learn his name, Naruto Uzumaki. She was gonna keep a close eye on him, and if Lord Zareth were kind, perhaps she could try to court him once he grew a few years older. She wouldn't mind learning to experience what it was like to receive looks other than hate, lust, or fear. And maybe it would be nice, if he came to love me. Do you think you can cure him, Porlyuzuka? Makarov asked softly, anticipation and apprehension mingling in his core as he eyed the pink-haired healer. Naruto quickly tensed up even more if that was possible as he waited to hear the woman's response, eyes quickly darting to his calm sensei before he forced them back to her. Steeling herself for what was to possibly come next, Porlyuzuka inwardly sighed tiredly. It's possible, but I won't mince my words, Makarov. Even if I was able to synthesize a cure, it may already be too late to treat your friend's illness.
Naruto clenched his fists at the news, barely reining in his anger as he breathed in through his nostrils. How long would it take you to devise a cure if possible?
A few weeks at most. I've seen this type of disease a long time ago and I've devised ways of curing it, but to gather the ingredients will take quite some time. She replied before shifting her attention to Tyr, a frown tugging at her lips. You should not have given up on finding someone who can help you. Had you come here years or even months ago, your chances of survival would be much higher than they are now. As it is, I will still do my best to help, but you need to ensure to stay rested at all times, understood? Tyr nodded as he got off the bed, walking over to join his student while keeping his gaze on the healer. I understand, thank you for being kind enough to help me with my situation. Porlyuzuka nodded in return before suddenly and without any warning swiftly pointed her broom to the right, much to the confusion of the startled student and teacher pair. Makarov hid a smile at the sight. Out. Now. You humans reek, she demanded. The sudden transition in character was too much for Naruto and Tyr to bear. When 2 seconds passed after her demand and the pair still stayed in place, Porlyuzuka decided to take matters into her own hands. OWW. What the hell is wrong with you, you old hag? Naruto questioned brusquely, unamused by the action of poor Lyuzuka swatting his head with her broom. Poor Lyuzuka gasped before her eyes narrowed in outrage. OWWW. Can you stop hitting me? What have I done to warrant this? Naruto swiftly took a few steps back away from his assailant, torn between glaring at the devil women or the two snickering men who simply couldn't cease their chuckling. What about them? Why are you not targeting them? She huffed. Such an ill-mannered child, ill-mannered. Naruto interrupted her, a vein bulging on his forehead. You're ill-mannered for hitting your guest with a dirty broom. Because your presence is not wanted in my home, she replied curtly, tossing her attention to the pair on her left and glaring at them. That goes for the two of you as well. Out. Now. Poor Lyuzuka thundered. Makarov and Tear raised their hand in surrender and swiftly started walking towards the entrance, Naruto joining alongside them while giving the old bat the stink eye. Once outside and more than a few meters away from poor Lyuzuka's home, Makarov turned towards his best friend's student, a shit-eating grin marring his elderly visage. So what do you think of poor Lyuzuka?
Judging by the snarl and the unhappy look on the shinobi's face, he was none too amused. If I had to be as polite as I can be about it, saying I didn't find her charming was an understatement.
Makarov guffawed and leant his forearm on the leg of the similarly laughing Tear. Naruto only rolled his eyes. It took a few seconds before the elderly wizard saint managed to rein in his laughter in order to speak properly. Poor Lyuzuka can be a character some of, scratch that most of the time, but there is no one I know who is more trustworthy and capable than her when it comes to the art of healing. If she says she can do it, then you can rest well because despite her gruff character, she truly is a caring and compassionate woman. For poor Lyuzuka to be praised in such a manner by someone of Makarov's standing, it only cemented the fact that the pink-haired healer was proficient, and Naruto would be lying if he said he didn't feel the weight on his shoulder lessen considerably. I'll take your word for it. What do you think, sensei? Naruto asked. Tear smiled lightly. I'm feeling hopeful. With any luck she'll be able to make a cure just in time and everything turns out to be alright. He replied before turning gaze downward to his vertically challenged friend. Thank you once more, Makarov, not just for this but for everything. I'm grateful. Nothing to thank me for, old friend. You yourself know that family is all about helping each other no matter what. Makarov responded cheerfully. The smile on Tear's face only widened as he looked up the sky, starting to finally feel the chains holding him back from freedom loosening up its deadly grip. A peaceful silence settled between the unusual trio as they walked back into town. I can see why you like him so much. Honestly, I don't know how to describe him except by saying that he's a really kind old man. Naruto gave his opinion about the current 5th-ranked wizard saint. Tear couldn't help but smile. That's Makarov for you. He's been like that for as long as I could remember, except a bit more hot-headed in the first 2-3 years of knowing him.
Naruto hummed before looking out the window, a bored expression plastered on his manly features as he stared at the passing forestry located between the cities of Magnolia and Oaktown.
Roughly half an hour had passed since Naruto and Tear parted ways with Makarov. The fairy tale guildmaster was not too happy but understood the necessity of returning. The pair did have to retrieve their belongings after all. They entered the train station and only had to wait for a couple of minutes until the train started heading out. That was 10 minutes ago. What do you think about everyone else? I imagine you're very happy about seeing your friend. Tear stated simply. Naruto looked over confusedly at his teacher before recognition overcame him. Oh, you mean Fu? Yeah, it was nice seeing and talking to her again. I'm a bit annoyed that she just shared our secret with her guildmates, but I suppose the decision isn't just solely mine. And? Tear eyed his student sharply. What was the reaction of her friends? Surprising, but in a good way. She certainly could have picked a worse bunch than the friendship nerds to divulge our secrets to, the blonde admitted. Tear chuckled. Friendship nerds, huh? From what you told me, you used to be like that before arriving at Earthland. He shook head at the thought, finding such a notion to be strange for his antisocial student. I am glad to learn that girl, Fu, has friends who know the truth about her and don't care. Perhaps they can be your friends as well given time. Maybe. Such a possibility had the former wizard saint feeling hopeful. Tear could already envision it. A future. A world. One in which his student had many friends of his own to call family, friends who dearly loved him and he in turn. Tear really hoped he could see such a day with his own 2 eyes. Naruto. Promise me that you won't make the same mistake I did. letting my fear, doubts and apprehensions hold me back from truly living life. Tyr stated seriously, all hints of mirth and amusement eviscerating from his gaze as he eyed his student. Naruto frowned confusedly. Where is this coming from, sensei? Please don't tell me that you're already thinking the worst about your situation. No, I'm not. Tyr alleviated his student's concern. I'm just thinking of a future where you have many friends, my precious student, a future that will not happen if you are to do what I did so long ago. The shinobi sighed. I'll try. That statement drawled out a pleased smile from the towering giant. Good. Silence returned to nest comfortably between the pair, Naruto more than content to try appease his boredom by gazing out the window while Tyr simply kept an eye out for the other passengers on board with them. Only there was no one inside this section of the train with them except for a heavily cloaked figure walking towards. The former wizard saint narrowed his eyes only to widen them in horror as the stranger threw away the encompassing cloak to reveal a large explosive lacrima strapped to his chest. A frighteningly glowing and bright explosive lacrima. Tyr quickly grabbed a hold of his student and jumped into the window, shattering the glass and propelling him and the startled shinobi away just in time for them to not be caught in the following explosion. Boom. Naruto got up and looked towards the direction of the speeding and now on fire train. His puzzlement quickly gave way to cold fury as he narrowed his eyes at the vehicle. Stay sharp. Tyr voiced out, form quickly tensed as he surveyed his surroundings with predatorial observance. The sound of clapping echoed across the clearing as a tall mysterious figure slowly marched towards the student-teacher pair, his form flanked by another profile just as muscularly imposing as the first. I must say, Tyr, it's pretty impressive how despite your sickness you still stand tall and proud, looking just as powerful as the day we last battled. The figure was now revealed to be a tall, well-built old man with an extremely unique appearance. The first stranger, and evidently the leader, wore a helmet with two horns protruding from the side of his head and curving upward. A black eye patch covered his right eye while the left eye, brown in color, gleamed with amusement. He possessed a thin mustache but had a long, and Naruto really did mean a long beard, longer than even his teacher by quite a lot of inches, reaching all the way down to the lower end of his stomach region. The second man, on the other hand, was notably much younger than the first, looking to be around middle-aged in appearance and possessing long dark hair with bushy triangular sideburns pointed diagonally upwards on either side of his face. A large mildly hooked nose, thin eyebrows, a bit of a stubble, and prominent eye bags were some of the features that the second man possessed. Tyr narrowed his eyes. Hades, of course you're here. It shouldn't surprise me that after so many years you still have a quarrel with me. Hades smirked. A quarrel with you? No, while I do find myself tempted to battle against you once more, that's not why I have come. I wish to make you an offer, though I was not aware that you have taken on a student, he said while gazing coolly at the blonde. Naruto glared coldly at the old man, not deeming him worth the effort to speak to. The former wizard saint crossed his arms. And pray tell, why would I wish to come to an agreement with a man who just attempted to kill both me and my student? A small test of your current abilities, to see if your skills have dulled or if it was worth coming here to make you an offer. You already know that I'm of the belief that only the strong should be the ones who inherit the world. Tyr scoffed. And you should already know that I think differently. Leave Hades, take Blue Note with you and leave. I'm not interested in what you have to offer. His statement caused Hades to chuckle and shake his head. A pity. We could have used someone of your skill and I would have liked to see the potential of your student. Rather unfortunate that won't happen. Suddenly the mirth faded away from Hades's eye, replaced by a coldness found only deep within the harsh climate of the Arctic. Blue Note, fight the boy but don't kill him if he has potential. Tyr is mine. Blue Note smirked before immediately diving for the shinobi. Tyr swiftly stood in front of Naruto, ready to shield his student only to be flung away courtesy of Hades wrapping his chain magic on the god of war's ankle and throwing him far away from his student. Despite his old age, Hades was abnormally strong and his throw caused Tyr to be smashing into several trees before his body eventually slammed into one that didn't break. You. Tyr groaned painfully before standing up. If you think I'll allow you to dictate this battle how you please, then you've got another thing coming. Tyr looked up to find the master of Grimoire Heart coldly gaze at him, darkness flaring all around him as he tensed up his magic. Just remember this, Tyr, you made this choice. And I do not regret it. The god of war rebuked, quads tensing and knees bending slightly before he leapt towards the elderly mage, the sheer power carried in his legs allowing him to quickly close the distance between them with one leap. Hades sidestepped away from the cross before retaliating with a vicious hook that would have had the former wizard saint spewing blood had Tyr not grabbed a hold of his fist and used it to slam Hades into the trunk of the nearby tree. Unfortunately for Hades, his torment didn't end there as Tyr drilled him with an uppercut to the stomach that had him slightly wheezing for air before the dark mage quickly recovered and landed a nasty punch right on Tyr's kisser, quickly following it up with another jab before throwing a sideways kick that would have given Tyr a concussion had he not grabbed a hold of the dark mage's limb and threw him over his shoulder to the open clearing behind him. Hades quickly righted himself in midair and with swift speed almost naked to even the eyes of experienced mages, cast the Amaterasu Formula 28 circle that he fired promptly towards the direction of the former wizard saint. Boom. The following explosion that ensued wiped out the surrounding forestry with startling ease. Hades waited for the dust to subside, eyes narrowing when he failed to catch sight of Tyr. He scanned his surroundings cautiously, perfectly aware that weakened or not that it would take a lot more than a single spell to kill the height-gifted man. A hypothesis that proved to be true as Tyr descended from the sky with a war cry. Hades backpedaled swiftly as Tyr slammed his fist in the spot he was formerly in, the ground concaving into a massive crater due to the enormous strength that lay in the man's body. The sound of whooshing in the air greeted Tyr's ears and he looked up to see Hades's chain magic a mere feet away from wrapping around his neck, but unfortunately for the dark mage, Tyr wasn't once occupying the position of wizard saint for no reason. Reacting with inhumane speed, Tyr clutched the chain of Hades and with a powerful tug, yanked the startled dark mage towards him while sidestepping and straightening his left arm for a meet and greet. The physics law of inertia was applied and the sheer force on which Tyr pulled the dark mage to him resulted in Hades's throat getting slammed into the former wizard saint's upper arm before Hades found his sight laying on the gloomy clouds in the sky, body falling into the ground with a painful thud. Tyr quickly descended on the downed mage with a powerful punch only for Hades to quickly retaliate with a kick that sent the taller man back a few steps. With a quick maneuver Hades was back on his feet, smirking as he eyed the calm disposition of the god of war. Not bad, it has been a while since I felt the rush of battle get to me. Tyr narrowed his eyes. If you ask me, I think it's shameful that a man with your knowledge would still trek down this dark path. There is no honor or peace in what you do. Such a statement caused Hades to scoff. You have no grounds to lecture me when it comes to the subject of morality, your hands aren't clean either, god of war. Tyr remained silent, the reminder of his less than honorable actions and past rendering him mute. No matter how he wished otherwise, the fact of the matter was, his hands were forever stained with blood and nothing was capable of changing that. Be it due to fate or mere coincidence, both Tyr and Hades moved forward simultaneously, Hades coating his fists and feet in darkness magic to equal the sheer physical strength of the former wizard saint, their punches connected before they both reeled back a step. Having trained all his life in hand-to-hand combat, Tyr had no problem making the first move, stepping in to throw a quick double jab and a cross which Hades blocked with his guard before striking back with a palm strike that Tyr deflected before connecting a mean elbow to Hades' forearm. Hades gritted his teeth before smashing his fist into the other man's abdomen, then attempting to deliver an uppercut that Tyr barely dodged before throwing a front kick that connected to the older man's chest and sent him rocketing back. Not done yet. Tyr rushed in while expertly weaving through the strikes sent by the master of Grimoire Heart, connecting a tight uppercut to the jaw that lifted the dark mage before Tyr tensed his arm, massive bicep flaring before bam, struck said mage with a powerful cross that sent him flying. Hades balanced himself in midair, planting the soles of his feet on the ground all the while smirking at the confused man through bloody lips. The reason became abundantly clear as numerous purple circles surrounded Tyr on all sides. Amaterasu Formula 100, Hades quietly whispered. Boom. Naruto looked over at the corner of his eyes towards the direction of the explosion, worry momentarily flashing in his features before he schooled himself as he paid 100% attention to his smirking opponent, no doubt having noticed his brief lapse in concentration. As much as he was loath to admit it, his opponent was a much more capable mage than he gave him credit for, his gravity magic in particular being an utter nuisance to the blonde. The only reason he could move around effectively was only due to the intense physical training he put his body through for 4 years. His magic attacks on the other hand, while powerful, still lacked the sheer power needed to endure the effect of Blue Note's fall ability, rendering his magic attacks and shadow clones as useless. As such, he'd been on the defensive throughout this entire fight, and though it was clear that in skill alone he surpassed the older man in hand-to-hand combat, that didn't matter as Blue Note, through the use of his gravity magic and superior physical strength, tipped the side to his favor when it came to the fight. With such disadvantages, Naruto detested to admit it, but he was going to lose at this rate. If he was going to win, he was going to have to rely on Kurama's chakra. Tear Odinson is a remarkable and powerful wizard, but like any other foe who's fought Hades, he too will fall at the hands of my master. The real question is, for how long can you fly? Blue Note asked seriously. Naruto didn't bother deigning him with an answer. Kurama, I'm going to need to use a bit of your chakra if I want to beat this guy. Go ahead, kid. But once this is over, I want you to remember this experience so that you push yourself to become stronger. As my jinchuriki, you represent me, and as such, a foe of this level should be but a fly when compared to you. Understood? The shinobi chuckled. That's perfectly alright with me. I was planning on doing just that. Thanks, Kurama. Kurama closed his eyes. Don't mention it, kid. One of the many welcome changes that happened during the last 3 years of Naruto's stay in Earthland was the developing friendship between him and his tenant. Kurama could be an ass at times, but he was much more friendly and cordial after Naruto started to treat him in a much more humane way. The end result culminated into a friendship that was still a bit rocky but was heading in the right direction. If you aren't going to answer that question, then at least answer this. How did you learn God Slayer magic? Answer that and I'll consider sparing you. Blue Note proposed seriously. Red tendrils of energy grew to encompass Naruto's form, his pupils transforming into slits and the blue hue of his eyes turning into a malicious crimson, much to the intrigue of the gravity wizard, a red bubbly tail sprouting from behind. HMPH, not interested. Not a second later, Naruto seemingly vanished only to reappear right before Blue Note, slamming his fist right into the man's nose, the sheer power in his strike concaving the Blue Note's face before his body flew back into several trees. Blue Note spat blood before standing up, an excited grin tugging at his bloody lips as he eyed his powered-up opponent. Excellent, so you can keep flying. Naruto narrowed his eyes. I'm not your typical light mage. If you dare to continue to stand against me, I will kill you. Walk away while I'm still feeling merciful. The older wizard let out a large bark of laughter. How amusing yet exciting. Well, come on then. I wish to see how far a light mage that kills can fly. HMPH. Punch, kick, knees, elbows, palm strikes, and so forth. Tyr and Hades exchanged all manner of attacks as they fought against one another, dodging, weaving, and parrying the assaults before striking back with their own attacks. They were on even footing, an impressive accomplishment for Hades considering Tyr was renowned for his physical capabilities. Hades wasn't as gifted in hand-to-hand combat as Tyr was, but he possessed a strategic mind that helped him utilize his multiple magic in his fight with the abnormally tall giant. Tyr weaved to the side, dodging the palm strike that would have hit him in the face had it been a split second later before retaliating with a low sweep kick meant to sweep the elderly dark wizard off his feet. Hades jumped and with a quick flex, materialized his chain magic that swiftly wrapped around Tyr's forearm before Hades hurled him over his shoulder to the other side of the clearing. Positioning his arm forward, hand getting engulfed in a purple magical sphere, Hades took precise aim and fired his grimoire ray at his opponent. Tyr quickly side-jumped, dodging the powerful, destructive beam while landing next to a tree before an idea took place in his mind. Swiftly he uprooted the enormous tree and to Hades' shock, hurled said tree with startling speed towards the master of Grimoire Heart. Relying on pure survival instincts, Hades leapt several feet over the massive plant before firing back with multiple beams of darkness that went right after the former wizard saint. Tyr swiftly took cover within the surrounding forestry, much to the older mage's annoyance. Hades tched as he landed on the ground, eye appraising his environment in an effort to spot any sign of where his foe could be hiding.
He didn't have to wait long before Tyr made his entrance, namely shooting off to him from the flank. The dark mage immediately whirled his stance to his quickly descending him on foe, raising a forearm to block the punch sent by the taller man before countering back with a lead hook that Tyr parried before taking a quick step back in order to throw an effective front kick that connected with Hades' chest,
sending the dark mage skidding back by quite a few steps. Hades quickly stabilized himself, smirking censor edily at the taller man while giving out the come gesture with his hand. A notion that Tyr had no problem fulfilling as he stepped forward forebodingly only to gasp before falling to his knees, coughing out a large amount of blood. Of course. Hades thought, chuckling as he beheld the weakened state of his opponent. Here I was starting to think that I might have been mistaken and that you were already cured of your disease, but clearly that's not the case. Tyr gritted his teeth, attempting to stand up only to fall on his knees once more, much to the amusement of the grimoire Heartmaster. You are really impressive. It's a shame you won't be around to witness the utopia I will create once I grasp the one magic in my hand, Hades stated, slowly marching to the downed wizard saint. He stood before his fallen opponent, gazing at him with cool indifference while restraining him with his chain magic. He wasn't going to take any chances with him. Have you nothing to say, Tyr Odinson? Only this. Tyr gazed back resolutely at the older wizard. My student will stop you, Hades. He will succeed where I have failed. Ha. Hades chuckled. If your student is as talented as you're silently implying and he survives against Blue Note, then I'll happily take him on. Then you should prepare yourself. Hades swiftly turned to the owner of the voice, eyes widening in shock at the sight he was beheld with. Naruto stood before the older wizard, his current appearance reminiscent as more of a monster than human. Red swirling mass of bubbly energy coated the shinobi's entire form. Dried but not too dry blood was painted on his features, presumably coming from the head of Blue Note that he held in his left hand. His right hand held a sword dripping with blood, and with the absolute fury blazing in his crimson orbs, one couldn't blame Hades for warily looking at the shinobi. Naruto glared menacingly at the older wizard. Because I did more than survive against Blue Note, I killed him. He promptly threw the head of Blue Note away. Hades immediately requipped a blade which he swiftly placed on Tyr's neck. One wrong move and your sensei is dead, he warned. The warning worked and Naruto scowled angrily but remained still. Suddenly, Hades sensed a powerful magical signature rapidly approaching their location from far away, a magical signature he was quite familiar with. He chuckled inwardly. Makarov, huh? Seems like I'll have to be quick. Hades hummed curiously. Tell me, boy, what is your name? And why should I tell a soon-to-be dead man? Humor me. Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto Uzumaki. Hades repeated, looking over the jinchuriki approvingly. I am Hades, master of the Dark Guild Grimoire Heart, and I have to say, you are an extraordinary young wizard, very extraordinary even to actually defeat Blue Note in your young age. It makes me wish to witness you reach and harness your full potential. Hades turned to the bound wizard while keeping his sight locked on the blonde out of the corner of his eyes. I have to admit, Tyr, your student is pretty impressive. Tyr ignored him. Naruto, remain calm. Don't let rage consume you. The master of Grimoire Heart only chortled before shaking his head. Don't try to stunt the boy's growth, it would be a shame for his growth to stagnate. Let go of my sensei. Naruto demanded coldly. Or you'll be joining your subordinate in the afterlife soon enough. Hades smirked. I have a better idea. What better way to bring out someone's full potential than to drown them in darkness? He said ominously before turning to the chained man. With swift speed he stabbed his blade into the former wizard saint's stomach. No. Naruto yelled before immediately sprinting to his teacher, Hades all the while retreating while the shinobi stayed behind. Tyr spat out blood much to Naruto's horror. Oh god. Oh god. We need to get you to a hospital now. It's too late for that. The light in Tyr's eyes began to dim, the remaining strength in his body rapidly evaporating away as he lay down on the field, vision growing darker with each passing second while he gazed into his student's frightened eyes. En Naru, too, son, he murmured quietly before his eyes permanently closed, a peaceful expression plastered on his visage. Naruto felt his heart stop beating, panic quickly surging in his core at the sight of his precious teacher having his eyes closed. He swiftly removed the blade and tried to cover Tyr's wound with his hands, removing his shirt and using it as a cloth when that didn't work. Sensei. Tyr-sensei. Wake up please. Naruto weakly gripped Tyr's shirt, despair wrapping around his chest like a vice before squeezing so painfully until he found himself unable to breathe. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up please. He desperately pleaded, shoulders shaking uncontrollably as the tears he tried holding in bay finally broke through the dam of his control. Dad. He whispered quietly, brokenly. Ak-gh, Zero choked. the air rapidly depleting from his lungs as his body was held up with a strong hand clamping on his throat with an inescapable iron grip. Fear gripped the alternate personality of Brain as he gazed into the cold, emotionless eyes of the blonde mage who was responsible for single-handedly defeating all the members of the Oración Cease as they laid down on the dirt, beaten, unconscious, and seemingly unable to wake up anytime soon. I will ask only one more time, tell me what you know of Hades, the master of Grimoire Heart. Do that and I will consider not killing you. Naruto eased his grip on the man's throat just enough for him to talk. Bravery overtook fear as Zero glared defiantly at the light wizard. You don't possess the balls to kill. Why else would you not kill these pathetic fools? He uttered through harsh gasps. I haven't killed them because I can tell that these pathetic fools, as you put it, are good people deep down. You on the other hand are a different story. Talk. Now. Even if I did know, I wouldn't tell you shit. In a last-ditch effort to mock the blonde, Zero spat at him and smirked in satisfaction. Naruto calmly pulled out a napkin from his requip space and wiped the spit in his cheek while impassively eyeing the smirking master of Oración Cease. Suddenly, the smirk faded away from Zero's face as the grip on his throat tightened to an unfathomable degree, wheezing and gurgling noise escaping him as he desperately tried and failed to breathe air into his lungs. Zero tried to plead for his life and when he realized how fruitless it was to try utter even a word, resorted to clawing and punching and kicking. Anything that would help loosen the grip on his neck. Much to his dismay, even that proved to be a hopeless endeavor. Nearly an entire minute passed before the body of Brain went limp, signifying the departure of his soul to the afterlife. Naruto only grunted before he shifted the corpse until he was carrying it over his shoulder. Seamlessly creating 5 clones who immediately set out to carry the bodies of the beaten members of Oración Cease, they headed towards the nearest headquarters of the Rune Knights, a desolate wasteland left behind in what was once a lavish and beautiful forest. Era, Magic Council Conference. This cannot be tolerated any further. It can be. His actions have only made Fury safer for its citizens. His actions. My dear friend is not only undermining our authority but it is also causing the citizens to be questioning our value and competence. Ujima, a normally composed and well-mannered old man, slammed his fist into the table as he glared heatedly at his colleagues. And what do you value more, fellow councilmen? Our reputation or the lives and safety of our people? I could not have phrased that better. Org nodded approvingly at the short old man before he narrowed his gaze dangerously in the direction of Leiji, Belno, Yuri, and Michello. The Magic Council exists for the sake of ensuring the safety of Fury and its citizens from all magical threats. Dark guilds are one such threat. Have you grown ignorant to the pain of the innocent who have been subjugated to the cruelty of such twisted wizards? Belno scoffed. Of course not. But there are consequences to that boy's actions. Each dark guild he hunts down only antagonizes the Balam Alliance. And what do you suggest we do? Ultir questioned, her soft and enticingly silky voice emanating nothing but amusement. Continue sipping tea and reading books while leaving dark guilds to their devices. Say what you will about Naruto Uzumaki, but there is no denying the fact that he's done more for Fury in the last 3 years than the council has in the last decade. And what a fascinating young man he is. Ultir barely managed to stop herself from sighing dreamily as she thought of the extremely handsome blonde mage strong enough to face and defeat Blue Note, and that was 3 years ago. Oh, I can't wait until I make you mine. Michello lost his patience. And how does this bode for us? I admit that we have been too idle when it comes to taking action against dark guilds and Zerif cultists, but not only does Uzumaki invite the wrath of the Balam Alliance, but as we speak his actions inspire others to follow in his footsteps. Such a consequence can cause great calamity. Something must be done about this. Every action ever taken has consequences, Michello. At least Naruto's action ensures that people are alive so they can deal with said consequences rather than be dead or worse. Ujima pointed out. Yuri crossed his arms. Not everyone is alive, are they? Or have you forgotten that the Dark Leviathan has killed numerous mages? Doesn't matter if they're dark wizards. If people come to rationalize killing, then it would only sow more discord and chaos on our world. Don't make it sound like he kills every dark mage he sees. There are just as many dark mages that are alive and in our custody thanks to his efforts. Lei Ji sighed tiredly. Perhaps, but the fact is, he is a wizard belonging to the guild Fairy Tail. A light guild. He is violating the rules we have put in place. We have placed those rules there for a reason. One could even say that Naruto Uzumaki's boldness to do as he pleases is what prompted Jose Parla to ignore our rules and attack Fairy Tail a week ago. The rules put in place must be upheld. And pray tell what our next action should be, Councilman Lei Ji. Org inquired sharply. Arrest Naruto Uzumaki? Hold him in our custody for freeing countless towns and cities of the horror of dark guilds? No. The way I see it, there is a powerful mage on par with our wizard saints who goes out of his way to hunt down twisted individuals and bring them to justice. He barely causes any property damage, has saved countless innocent people in the past 3 years. Even the leader of the church has praised his actions. Those 4 facts makes him exceedingly popular to the citizens. To detain him would only cause our people to further question our values. Org added. Crawford stroked his beard before tossing his gaze to his blue-haired colleague. Seagrain. You have been unusually silent today. What are your thoughts on the subject? Org, Ujima, and Ultir are right in that Naruto, the Dark Leviathan, Uzumaki has accomplished much for the people of Fury, but there is also no disputing the arguments made by the others. Seagrain grunted. While I am none too fond of Uzumaki, there is no denying that he's a powerful wizard. That said, he needs to learn some obedience instead of thinking he can do whatever he wants scot-free. I suggest that we remind both him and the world that we are the ruling body of magic. Oh Jelil, Ultir discreetly rolled her eyes at the man, aware that her pawn intensely disliked or perhaps even hated the mage touted as the Dark Leviathan just because he had Titania's admiration. So obsessed with defeating and humiliating Naruto Uzumaki, Jelil even forsook his Tower of Heaven plan in order to scheme something more dangerous for the blonde god slayer. Not that Ultir was too concerned. Naruto was far stronger than her pawn ever was. Though Ultir did find herself intrigued and even a tad bit excited for what Jelil had planned. Elaborate. What urgent news for the council. A Rune Knight captain barged into the highly classified meeting room, earning him irked glares from more than half the members inside. Crawford frowned heavily as he pinned the soldier with a soul-crushing stare. And what is so urgent that you would barge into a meeting that I made clear to all of you was not to be disturbed? Speak. The Rune Knight captain gulped before he shakily steeled himself. Esteemed council. One of my subordinates has just notified me that the Dark Leviathan has just faced and defeated Oracion Cease single-handedly. Such a statement garnered wide-eyed reaction from every single person present in the room. Suddenly, chaos ensued as fellow council members thundered at each other, completely shaken and caught off guard by the staggering reveal. Order. Order. Crawford bellowed. Ultir giggled as she witnessed the chairman slump in defeat from his orders getting effectively ignored before her thoughts shifted to her heart's current desires. Defeating Oracion Cease all on your own. Ultir bit her lips, arousal suddenly flooding her senses as her nipples hardened from beneath her yukata. Seeing as though the pandemonium in the council room wouldn't end anytime soon, the Arc of Time wizard stealthily left the meeting, more concerned with satisfying her lust than listening to the sea of wrinkles yell at one another. Magnolia. Though it had been a week ago that the Fairy Tail Guild Hall was destroyed thanks to one former wizard Saint Jose Parla, the members of Fairy Tail were motivated and hard at work to rebuild the guild hall bigger and better than ever. 1 week later after the incident, and the mages of Fairy Tail could not help themselves from crying out in happiness as they accomplished their goal and finally allowed themselves to relax and unwind. Of course, relaxing and unwinding in Fairy Tail's perspective meant celebrating and partying relentlessly. That was the reason for why the past 3 hours were spent for the Fairy Tail members doing nothing but laughing, drinking and partying. Some of the more eccentric members like Natsu and Gray actually getting along and grinning at one another, while the more sane members such as Lucy and Mirajane just giggled and conversed with the other sane girls. Almost everyone was having a good time. Almost being the key term. Sitting by his lonesome in the bar counter, Makarov sighed tiredly as he contemplated the recent and not so recent events that bombarded the people he cared about. Watching 3 of his children get crucified by iron poles had sent him over the edge. So gripped by rage, he had charged into Phantom Lord, ready to teach Jose a painful lesson only to have one thrust onto him instead. Knowing that his children had to fight all on their own while he lied on the bed, his body utterly drained and depleted of energy, it didn't do his conscience well, especially not when he learned that Jose had aimed and fired a Jupiter cannon at his children. It was nothing short of miraculous that Urza had managed to defend them from such a devastating onslaught. Makarov prayed to God in both gratitude and relief that his children were alive and well. But it was he who was supposed to protect and shield them, as both the guildmaster and the father figure to many bright mages in fairy tale. It was his responsibility and duty to have prevented Levi, Jet, and Droy from getting crucified, his responsibility and duty to take Urza's place and shield everyone from the Jupiter cannon. All ended well. Yes, but that didn't stop Makarov from feeling the guilt surge within him as he felt like he had failed in his role of protecting his kids from danger. And if only my mistakes ended there. Makarov clenched his fists as he thought of the numerous other times he had failed in life. Failing in instilling good values and morals in Ivan, the strained relationship between him and Laxus. Not getting there in time to save Tyr, Naruto consumed with vengeance, and now the Phantom Lord incident. Makarov let out another weary sigh before he looked from the corner of his eyes at Gajeel and Juvia, two former members of the now disbanded Phantom Lord, with the former being the one who crucified 3 of his brats. His decision to bring them in here 4 days was met with outrage, naturally, but Makarov felt that he needed to be there for those 2 souls just as he had been for the most part with everyone else. Turning a blind eye to those who lived through unfortunate circumstances, even if they had a hand in destroying the guild and hurting his family, it didn't sit right with him, and that was why he went out of his way to bring them in even when some of his mages looked on disapprovingly. Makarov didn't know if he had truly made the right decision, but he hoped that would be the case, not wanting to disappoint and let down Fairy Tail any more than he already had, even if everyone else thought otherwise. He felt weak, powerless, incapable. Incapable of being the guiding hand that would usher the younger generation to a brighter future. If only he was younger, could he have prevented at least half the unfortunate circumstances from ever happening. The issue was, there is currently no one available to take my place, Makarov ruefully thought. Laxus with his current mindset is unsuited to being Fairy Tail's guild master. Urza, Fu, and Mira are a bit too young for the task. Though that itself could be argued and debated against, considering that promising wizard Gaara is a guildmaster himself and leads quite a capable guild. Mistogen is too mysterious, and a large wall is still in place between Naruto and the rest of the guild. There is Gildarts, but he's still away on that century quest and only God knows when he'll return, not mentioning that I just can't see him being interested in the position. Makarov exhaled tiredly. I just need to keep enduring a giggle pierced his thoughts, and Makarov looked up just to spot Lisana giggling with Lucy, Kana, and Fu about something. The elderly wizard saint felt his eyes soften as he continued gazing at the youngest of the Strauss siblings, remembering a time all too well when he learned of how she had almost lost her life but was saved by a timely intervention courtesy of Naruto. The fear that welled within him in knowing that he had almost lost one of his kids, never did he ever want to go through such terror ever again, and more than that. He made a vow that day that he would protect his brats within the best of his abilities, and he will do exactly that. Determination gripped the short guildmaster as he unconsciously relaxed his posture. I am old, I am tired, and I am not as strong as I once was, but damn it to hell if I won't keep persevering for these annoying and lovable brats. I don't care if I have to be guildmaster for another 40 years. I made a vow to be strong for them, and I will be strong for them. Now feeling inspired, Makarov turned and faced the cover model of the guild. Mira, get me a large mug of beer. Mira giggled and did as instructed. You got it, master. She returned not a minute later and handed him his favorite drink. Flashing her a thankful grin, Makarov wasted no time in chugging the contents of his mug down his throat before he slammed it on his stool. Makarov paused just as he was about to order another filling for his mug, turning towards the entrance of the guild hall as he sensed the massive energy signature of Tyr's student approaching the building. He wasn't the only one to sense the sudden influx of energy just a few meters away from the building. Fu paused her conversation with the girls, turning an expectant and happy look to the door, much to Lucy's confusion, who turned a questioning gaze to Kana only to be perplexed further by the grin on her face. Mira nay. Lisana suddenly called out, startling Lucy. Naruto Aniki is back. Immediately, Lucy watched on curiously as the largest blush she had ever seen in her entire life doused Myra's face. Mira was not the only one who had heard Lisanna's proclamation. Pretty much everyone in the Guildhall had, and if possible, the mages of Fairy Tail only became rowdier at the knowledge that one of their strongest S-class mages had returned. Unknown to everyone but Makarov, who chuckled good-heartedly at the sight, a panicked look crisscrossed Urza's visage as she fretfully debated what outfit she could requip to, wanting to look her best for her crush. "Hey Lisanna?" Lucy softly called out. The youngest of the Strauss siblings hummed curiously. "Who is Naruto?" "Who is?" Lisanna threw a disbelieving look at the curvy stellar mage before realization crossed her features. "Oh right. I completely forgot that you've only been here for a couple of weeks. Feels like you've been here since the start, you know. You just belong here." Lucy smiled appreciatively. "Thanks." Lisanna smiled back. "You're welcome. To answer your question, he's one of our stronger S-class mages. You probably know him by his title, the Dark Leviathan." The daughter of the Heartfilla Fortune felt her eyes widened in both surprise and excitement. "The Dark Leviathan? He's here?" "He is," Fu affirmed, attention still locked on the large door. Many questions bustled into Lucy's head as she patiently eyed the door, wondering why was Fu so excited to see another member even if said member is very famous. Why had Lisanna called him Aniki? And perhaps most important of all was knowing why the blush to end all blushes was and still is on Myra's face. Though Lucy did have a pretty good idea on what that reason was. Before she could ponder further on the theories, the sound of boots hitting the pavement reached her, and everyone else's, ears, and it didn't take long before the doors to the Guildhall was pushed wide open. Emerging from the doors, a tall blonde-haired man walked in, confidence evidently portrayed in his every step as he walked closer and closer to the bar while the fairy tale wizards celebrated his return. Lucy blushed as her eyes scanned the features of the man's visage, noting down the texture, the sharp lines and curves that came to form a face so beautiful that she had to wonder if she was actually dreaming. To say nothing less of his body, which was perfectly sculpted with extremely broad shoulders narrowing into a thin waist, full and protruding pecs being supported by a muscular and thick back. 18-inch biceps that showed even from his attire. And strong legs that looked like it could easily snap a tree. The blonde mage was well outfitted, wearing a simple long-sleeve black shirt that hugged his beefy and muscular frame along with casual dark gray sweatpants. For those wondering, Naruto's physique resembles Jin Kazama from Tekken 8, an amazing physique if I may say so myself. It was simple clothing, nothing extravagant, but when worn by Naruto, more than half the female members in the guild blushed as they laid eyes on him. "Naruto!" Fu suddenly and cheerfully called out, waving excitedly when the blonde mage turned towards them. Naruto sent Fu a small smile, flashing a small nod at the girls around the mint-haired jinchuriki before he continued marching forward. Confusion tinting his gaze as he internally wondered about the complete reconstruction of the guild. As was the usual for whenever he walked in, Naruto had to sidestep as Natsu appeared from thin air just to throw a violent kick in the spot the shinobi formerly stood in. "Don't destroy the Guildhall, Natsu!" Everyone minus Naruto and a few others yelled at the idiotic fire mage. "Naruto! Fight me!" Natsu bumped his fists together, staring excitedly into Naruto's bored gaze. No pretending to have not heard him, Natsu leapt at the shinobi only to be stopped dead in his tracks as a soft but powerful hand gripped his shoulder in place. Natsu shuddered as he looked over his shoulder and met Urza's terrifying gaze. "This is not how we welcome back family, Natsu. Behave." AI. Off in the background, all the men excluding Naruto, Natsu and a blushing Makarov who closed his eyes fainted as their nostrils spewed so much blood that they couldn't possibly remain awake, happy and perverted grins decorating their faces from noticing Urza in her new attire. A satisfied look overcame Urza's features as she sent Natsu away before a pink hue colored her cheeks much to Lucy's astonishment. "It's good to see you again, Naruto." Naruto nodded. "It's good to see you too, Urza." He replied politely, oceanic blue eyes discreetly admiring the Queen of the Fairies' features. True to his predication 3 years ago, Urza had only further blossomed into a woman with beauty unimaginable to even the most talented and creative of artists. With a smooth milky complexion that drew the eyes to Urza's mesmerizing scarlet locks, a small nose that scrunched up cutely whenever she grew annoyed, her lips, so naturally full and temptingly plump, the kind that caused many men, married or not, to have ill-appropriate fantasies of staying lip-locked with the Titania for hours. And with the almond-shaped eyes that peeked out from underneath fluttering eyelashes. eyes so brown and seemingly exuding nothing but warmth and kindness. When the woman in question was not in a disciplinary mood, Urza truly was a sparkling gem among gems. She was so unbelievably gorgeous that she could turn an entire platoon of gay men straight and a platoon of straight women into die-hard lesbians. And all that was just her face. Her body, when not adorned by her signature armor, was the stuff that could easily ruin marriage, invoking desires and lusts that could not be quelled by any normal means. Now dressed in a low-cut white tank top with tight black leggings, none of the men, including Naruto himself, could stop themselves from taking an appreciative glance, though the shinobi admired much more stealthily than the others. Urza was a physically powerful woman. It was to be expected considering the strain she usually put her body through with her taxing and demanding workout. But despite that, if one were to peer at her body, they'd find no muscle definition, all the muscle definition in her body hidden by pleasing softness. Two large mounds of flesh poked from Urza's chest, a vast canyon of soft creamy cleavage exposed to the shinobi's eyes. Letting his drift down after getting an eyeful of Titania's fat sensors, he caught sight of a delicate and tiny waist that curved into eye-poppingly wide hips, the kind that made Naruto inwardly wish he could see Urza's backside. Gaze lowering down further, meaty and exceedingly girthy thick thighs came into view before they shrunk down into sizable and enticing calves. There was no two ways about it. Urza was hot as censored. "Thank you for dealing with Natsu," he nodded stoically. The pink hue on Urza's visage darkened a shade as she fidgeted shyly. "It's no problem. I have much that I need to discuss with Master Makarov, so I'm afraid you'll have to excuse me," he politely stated before moving past her, leaving a disappointed but understanding redhead in his wake. Making his way to the elderly wizard saint, it didn't take long before Naruto reached the older mage, throwing an acknowledging nod towards a softly smiling Mira before he bowed to the short guildmaster. "Hello, master. Naruto, my boy, it's good to see you in good health," Makarov remarked kindly, bringing a small smile on the shinobi's visage that he struggled to wipe away. "Thank you. Out of curiosity, what's up with the new look for the guild?" Makarov sighed before he got off the stool. "It's a long story. Come. Let's talk in my office. I'm sure you and I have much that we need to discuss." The shinobi nodded before following the short master upstairs. Waiting until they were well out of sight, Lucy tossed an extremely inquisitive gaze at the girls. "Okay. I am on the edge of my seat here. Someone please fill me in on all the details." "Like what?" Fu feigned ignorance, giggling alongside Kana and Lisana when the curvy celestial wizard deadpanned. Lucy sent her a menacing glare. "Everything. How did you know he was here before all of us?" She then turned to the takeover mage. "Why did you call him Aniki?" Lisana blushed as Kana laughed out loud. "And does Mira like him? And what was up with Urza? She definitely likes him." "Honestly, it's kind of a long story." Lisana scratched her cheek off-handedly. "I'll start," Fu declared cheerfully. "The reason why I knew he was here is because Chome told me." Lucy's eyes widened. "Wait, so is he?" Her voice hushed down considerably. "Like me?" "Yes." Fu nodded before her voice quieted down too. "Keep this between us and don't tell anyone. I only told you because I really trust you, Lucy." Lucy flashed a grateful smile before a determined glint entered her gaze. "I won't tell anyone." "As for why I called him Aniki," Lisana spoke up. "It's because he saved me 2 years ago from Elfman Ni-chan when he was on a rampage." "Wait, what?" Lisana sighed, smiling thankfully at Kana when the card wizard laid a comforting palm on her shoulder. "As I said, it's a long story." A gentle look morphed into Lucy's visage. "You don't have to tell me anything if it makes you uncomfortable." No, I don't mind, it's just been a while since I thought about that day." Lisana spoke reminiscing before she shook her head. "When we all had first met Naruto, he came in with his teacher who was an old friend of Makarov and who we also found out was the former 5th-ranked wizard saint before he retired. No one really knows the details of why he had decided to join or why he had Naruto join, but they did, and we were naturally happy about having more members to the family." "You forgot to mention the part of Mira kissing him after he had flung her to the wall to protect Urza," Kana spoke up. Fu laughed as Lucy looked on wide-eyed. "Mira did what?" Lisana sighed before throwing an annoyed look at the brunette. Mira Ne before that day was very different from how she is now. Back then Mira Ne was the kind of person who enjoyed tormenting everyone and causing fights in the guild. She was even Urza and Fu's rival. Don't I know it? Fu spoke annoyedly. Back then Mira was a full-on bitch. She declared before throwing an apologetic look to the youngest Strauss. No offense, Lisanna. None taken. But yeah, Mira enjoyed doing things that would just absolutely stun someone. One time she even cut Kana's barrel in half just as she was drinking from the thing. Fu gestured to the now fuming brunette. Kana scowled. Don't remind me. Anyway, Lisanna interjected. Later that day when they joined 3 years ago, Naruto and his teacher had left in order to go retrieve their belongings in another town, and then an hour or two later our own master suddenly left in a blitz, much to our confusion. We tried following him but he was too far gone. Dread grew in the pits of Lucy's stomach as she continued listening. Our master eventually returned and Naruto was with him, but he was in a really bad state. We later learned that Naruto and his teacher Tyr were attacked by the Dark Guild Grimoire Heart. GG Grimoire Heart. Aren't they? One of the 3 leaders of the Balam Alliance. Yes. Lisanna interrupted softly, a solemn air suffusing the area around them. Kana sighed before deciding to take over. Naruto wasn't the same after that. Mind you, he wasn't exactly the friendliest person before Grimoire Heart attacked, but he was at least kind enough to acknowledge and talk to us. For a full year. Lisanna spoke up, shifting the Heartfilla's attention back to her. Naruto spoke to hardly anyone. Any attempt to comfort or befriend him was coldly ignored as he busied himself by either training, going on long solo missions, or destroying dark guilds. The only people he spoke or interacted with was just with Master or Fu. You remember how I told you about some of the hardships that come with being a jinchuriki? At Lucy's solemn nod, Fu continued. It allowed me and Naruto to relate to one another quite easily. In his eyes we were family because we went through the kind of hardships that were vastly different from what people were accustomed to experiencing. Lucy's heart broke. Poor guy, he's been through a lot. Fu smiled sadly. Yeah, but despite that he's a very kind person. It's because of him that I have a life and family here in Earthland. Wait, he brought you here? Sort of. It's hard to explain and it's not really my secret to tell, but it effectively came down to him making a hard choice, and said choice could either bring all of us here with him, the jinchuriki I mean, or we'd stay back in the elemental nation. He made the choice to bring us here after he saw how much I wanted a second chance at life. I know you said it's not your secret to tell, but what made the choice hard for him? Lucy inquisitively asked, Lisanna and Kana leaning forward in intrigue as well. Fu shrugged her shoulders. I honestly don't know. All I can say is that he was making an important deal, and from what little he told me, it has something to do with him fulfilling an extremely hard task that could kill him. He only accepted the deal instantly when he learned that choosing to not take the deal meant that me and my fellow jinchuriki would not be able to live away from the suffering back in our original world. Lucy looked odd. That's really nice of him. As I said. Fu grinned brightly. He's a very kind person, he just doesn't show it much. I consider him as my big brother because he's super kind. Back on topic though. Lisanna, the stage is yours. Lisanna rolled her eyes. Eventually, Mirane had decided to take me and Elfman Ni-chan with her on a S-class quest, and it was basically about defeating a monster called the Beast. The monster was really powerful and I was assigned to help evacuate and protect the citizens while Mirane and Elfman Ni-chan fought the monster. Unfortunately, it was way too strong and Elfman Ni-chan, seeing no other option, had to resort to using his takeover magic. By then I had finished evacuating the citizens and I had arrived just in time to see him perform his magic. An uncomfortable expression marred Lisanna's face as she recalled that dreadful day. Elfman Ni-chan had always been a strong-willed individual, so I had simply believed that he successfully took over without much trouble, not once at all thinking that the beast too possessed a strong will of its own. I went up to him to embrace him even against Mirane's warning, who was too injured to stand on her own. The beast, who, unknown to me at the time, had been in control and would have killed me had Naruto not arrived just in time to stop the killing blow. From there Naruto defeated the beast and it later reverted back to Elfman Ni. Guilt swamped and took a hold of Lucy as she winced. I'm so sorry for bringing up bad memories. Lisanna waved off the apology. It's alright Lucy, it was a long time ago, as you can imagine. Me and my siblings were traumatized by the experience, more my siblings than me. Mirane had almost completely quit being a mage from fear that she would either put me or Elfman Ni in harm's place, and Elfman Ni. She sighed morosely. He felt so much shame that he couldn't be around me for a little over an entire month. No matter what I did, Nothing allowed him to be rid of the guilt of knowing that he almost killed me. That's where Aniki comes in. Noticing the smile that now tugged at their faces, Lucy allowed herself to relax as she listened attentively to her short-haired friend. Aniki, who had only interacted with Master and Fu after he saw the pain that Elfman Ni was going through and spoke some sense into him. It was later around at night that Elfman entered home and hugged me before he broke down crying. Ah. Lucy felt a bit of moisture build up in the corner of her eyes as Lisanna recounted the events. A glance to her left and right revealed that Fu and Kana suffered from the same waterwork predicament she was going through. Lisanna nodded, bringing a hand to wipe away the faint tears as she smiled brightly. It was the happiest I had ever been in over a month, hugging and talking to my big brother again. Mira naturally joined in on the hug and I felt complete, having my family with me. Of course, you'd think that the story ends there but not quite. Fu happily interjected, drawing an annoyed glare from Lisanna who shushed the mint-haired mage before looking back over at Lucy. We learned later that night that Naruto Aniki also offered to help train Elfman Ni until he was confident again that he could protect us. It was very sweet. Especially when you consider the fact that until then, Naruto had only ever interacted with Fu and Master and no one else. I'm glad to hear that everything turned out well. Lucy remarked genuinely before a questioning glint entered her gaze. What about Mira though, how'd she get rid of her guilt? Naruto Aniki also helped in that regard, the youngest Strauss sibling answered. Mira Ne couldn't stomach leaving us or worse taking me and Elfman Ne on missions and so her magic kept on dwindling until it almost got to the point where she'd have to quit being a mage. Aniki heard about it from Elfman Ni and showed up to our house the next morning to kidnap Mira Ne and force her to train alongside him and Elfman Ni. Lisanna chuckled at the memory. The girls couldn't help but join in and giggle, finding the idea to be quite humorous. I naturally joined in and it continued like that for 3 to 4 weeks until both Elfman Ni and Mira Ne felt ready again to go on missions. And that's why Lisanna calls him Aniki, Kana spoke teasingly. Because not only did Naruto save her life, but because he also helped Elfman and Mira when they both were going through a rough time. And I take it, he's cool with it? Lucy asked curiously. Lisanna nodded. Yeah, he slowly started opening up to us and then to everyone else in the guild. Mind you, he's still not super friendly, but if you were to go up to him, he'd acknowledge and talk to you, but he would keep it short. And that's also how Mira developed the biggest crush ever on my brother. Fu stated before she adopted a thinking pose. Though that could be debated considering that Erza has a massive crush on Naruto too. Lucy looked over curiously in Erza's direction, spotting the woman in question talking to Mirajane about something. And Erza has a crush on Naruto because, Fu shrugged. Who knows, I'm one of her best friends and she's too embarrassed to tell me. All I do know is that it's pretty funny that their rivalry started again because of their shared feelings for our whiskered blonde warrior. Kana snickered. Thanks.